Unspoken Issues.
What is going on, legions of the unspoken? Hey, just real quick, before we hop into this episode, I've got a quick 3 to 4 minute blurb that I wanted to do on the creator of this series, The Protectors, and the series itself, and then we will get into the discussion of the comic. So let's get right into it.
The writer of the series we are about to discuss is R.A. Jones. Jones is a renowned writer and editor based in Tulsa, who made a significant mark in the comics industry starting in the 1980s. His career began as the executive editor of Elite Comics, and he contributed to several comics news magazines like Amazing Heroes and Comics Buyer's Guide. Jones is particularly noted for his prolific work with Malibu Comics, where he authored numerous titles such as Dark Wolf, Fist of God, Scimitar, Merlin, Sinbad, White Devil, The Protectors, The Ferret, Pistolero, Prototype, Nightman, Airman, and Star Trek, Deep Space Nine. He also wrote for other major publishers, including Dark Horse, Image, Innovation, Humanoid, DC, and Marvel. Influenced by his father and legendary figures like Stan Lee and Roy Thomas, Jones's dedication to storytelling and his ability to draw inspiration from a variety of sources have made him a respected figure in the comic book world. As for the series that is the topic of today's show, The Protectors was a 20-issue comic book series published by Malibu Comics from 1992 to 1994. Initially intended as a 6-issue series, its positive reception led to an extended run. The series featured many characters from Center publications, which had fallen into the public domain, and often gave them new names and updated costumes. The Protectors universe saw heroes, known as supernormals, emerging since the late 1930s, with a resurgence of new heroes in 1979. The series centers on these heroes coming together to combat various villains, including the formidable Mr. Monday and his Steel Army. The storyline is rich with crossover events, internal team dynamics, and epic battles. The Protectors roster boasts a diverse array of heroes, each with unique abilities and backgrounds. Airman, known for his aerial prowess, enhanced strength, and agility, excels in reconnaissance and combat. Amazing Man, a powerhouse with superhuman strength and invulnerability, battles both external foes and internal manipulation by series villain, The Great Question. Arc controls electrical energy, crucial for tackling technological threats, while Aura generates energy fields for protection, adding strategic depth. The Ferret, a tenacious and agile fighter, excels in reconnaissance and surprise attacks with his expert tracking skills and peak physical condition. Gravestone, formerly Phantom, can return from the dead, adding a supernatural edge to the team with his combat prowess. Man of War, a leader with superhuman strength and durability, embodies duty and honor, making him key in battles. Mighty Man, another powerhouse, combines strength and invulnerability with compassion and a commitment to justice. Nightmask, Richard Reinhardt, relies on intellect and physical training, showing immense courage despite lacking superpowers. The Witch, a mystic, casts spells and manipulates magical energies, helping to counter supernatural threats. Prince Zardi, the Eternal Man, immortal with vast knowledge, provides unique depth with his risk-taking and historical perspective. Opposing these heroes is Mr. Monday, the series' secondary antagonist and commander of the Steel Army, serving under the Great Question. Originally, Professor Erwin Montag, Mr. Monday's transformation began after surviving a nuclear explosion and being enhanced with cybernetics by the Great Question. He leads a reign of terror, starting with a massacre at a police station and continuing with widespread destruction across America, prompting President Brian O'Brien to form the Protectors. His sadistic nature, arrogance, and overconfidence define him as a formidable and despised adversary.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Unspoken Issues podcast. We have returned. We're talking Protectors tonight, which is a Malibu book, started in 1992. Went for 20 issues. We're going to be talking the first 6 tonight. Maybe a little dive into the handbook as well. But why? Why the Protectors, Dean Compton?
Well, first off, I just want to say comic books are so important to me. And I've loved comic books just like I love superheroes, I love comic books. But when I got into comic books, I was like, wow, this is everything here. And this is one of the first comic books I ever, when I started getting the collection that I got. It was, I think I stole it, but I think I bought the first one. I think I stole issue 5. I think I stole some.
But you had to get your hands on issue 5.
I remember seeing it, and the first thing I thought, I was in 7th grade, and I was pissed as hell.
Okay.
because I'd started getting into superheroes when I was in 6th grade. I started creating my own superheroes, and I created a team called Protectors. And I was so mad. I was like, how could nobody have come and done this? This is a great name. It was populated with all kinds of great characters. First off, they would say, Protectors protect, like Avengers Assemble.
Right.
So that's what they did. And they were led by a guy named Law, who was basically the Punisher. Good. He had guns, and he had an 8-ball, because I could draw an 8-ball. You know what I mean? So he had an 8-ball on his chest. Pretty why is he called Law if he just kills criminals? It's fucking weird. I also had two gods, Athena and Freya, because the Avengers had Thor, so I had 2 gods.
Right.
And then a year later, it turns out they stole my name. And I had the fortune a few years back, about 10 years ago, to do a podcast with R.A. Jones, who wrote these Protectors issues, Tom Mason, who wrote the Man of War spinoff and also was the executive artistic director of Malibu Comics at the time, part owner, and Roland Mann, who was the editor of Protectors, who wrote the Arrow one-shot. I think he wrote, I can't remember what else he wrote, but he wrote something else in the Genesis universe too. But I did let R.A. Jones know that he had stolen that from me. And I was very upset about it, and he copped to it. You can go find it. He copped to it. He admitted it. He didn't want to be found out, but he had been. But for real, obviously, he didn't steal this name from me. But I was just really taken by this cover. I had the newsstand cover where Man of War is grabbing the American flag. Like he's the British Bulldog, right? He's got the UK flag under his thing. And I was like, what is this? And at the top it said, Malibu does it again. And I don't know how, but I had heard of Malibu Comics at this. Maybe because Image had come out and they were associated with Image, or maybe I'd seen Dinosaurs for Hire or Robotech or something they were putting out. So I was busy getting to know everything at the time, just getting started. And I was like, of course, Malibu did it again. They do great stuff. I didn't know shit from Apple Butter about Malibu Comics, but I picked it up and I was just like, wow, this is really cool. I get to start from a very base level. I love government interplay with superheroes. I love government skullduggery. And these first 6 issues have a lot of that. And it was just nice to get on the ground floor of something. And it turns out I was not on the ground floor because these were Centaur characters, or they're based on Centaur characters. But for me, it was a fresh start at the time when I was first getting involved, and I was very excited to see these. They also came with posters, so you got a cool poster for your $250 or whatever it was. I mean, I got it for free probably because I was just fucking crime lord of Batesville, Arkansas's Walmart Supercenter. That was another thing. I saw this on the newsstand, which Tom Mason said was because they had one person at Malibu whose job was just to hound the newsstand. So he was like, we thought it delivered results. We're never sure about how hardcore those results were, but we knew it got some. I was like, well, it got some because I saw Spawn on the newsstand, which was published by Malibu, Protectors, etc. So this is just a comic that's near and dear to my heart from the very start. I've grown friendships with the guys who made it, which I never would have thought would have been possible when I was picking this up. I think there's a lot to hear. And it just reminds me of that special time when everybody's golden age, that 7th grade, 6th grade, you're first starting to get into things. This was a very important moment of my golden age.
Man, 1992, what a year for comics that was.
Right.
You know, and this
WCW published by Marvel.
I'm looking at the newsstand right now. Just hopped on there. There was only actually one Image comic that hit in September of 92. That was Spawn number 4 was on the shelves.
Yeah,
so
I remember seeing Spawn, and then later the one where he has all the guns. Oh, yeah. There were some Wildcats on the shelves. I saw Brigade. And then Walmart would later have like the 4 packs of Youngblood, and they would pack Spawn number 1 with those VHS tapes that one day we'll cover with that guy who was big into like fleas. In the video, y'all know Lotus, the flea lady. So anyhow,
Eclipso number 1.
Know, you should find out. Look it up.
Right.
But yeah, they had a very strong newsstand presence in Batesville, Arkansas. So yeah, I can't remember the person's name who was in charge of it, but goddamn, they were doing work.
Darry, I never can remember. I know you're younger than us. So 92, I'm sitting there trying to think of what you're doing. If you're on the tricycle or if you're on your bike, I can't remember.
He had that Transformers Power Wheels.
Tell me all about it here, man. Protectors, did it land on your radar at any point prior to doing this show tonight?
I did not read that. I don't remember seeing it. Could definitely be on me, though. The only one that I had read before it was suggested was the handbook. I do not know how I got my hands on that, but once I saw the cover.
Did you steal it?
I did not steal it, and I'm not even 100% sure I still own it, but I remember the cover of all the characters standing on the steps of the Capitol. I remember reading it and probably being very, very confused because I had never heard of these characters before. But no, this was the first time I read any issues from the series. I enjoyed it a great deal. I don't know that I would have at the time because it's got kind of an older feel to it, but I thought this was great, very solid, and I'm probably going to go ahead and read the rest of the series.
There's probably a lot more in this book that can be appreciated as an adult reading it than probably as a child, because there's a lot of political machinations that's going on that takes place in DC. This is government sponsored, and so there's probably more of an element that you can enjoy now than you would back then, for sure.
Man, I don't think I would have really appreciated this as a kid.
Right.
The X-Men and Spider-Man and stuff, and very surface level things. And this, you got to read this, and you really got to follow arcs in this. And I get why it was made, because again, a lot of that late Bronze Age stuff, well, the creators were fans, and then the creators got lucky enough to do this stuff, and they made books that they would like, and you get a lot of inside baseball stuff. But The Protectors is good. It definitely feels like you got on the ground floor, but it's less about fighting and more about team dynamics and all that other stuff, which they do a great job at laying the groundwork for, to the point where it's fighting the bad guys almost an afterthought, which again is something that as an adult, I want to know how everyone works, and I want to know how they come together as a team. But back in the day, I would have been like, why aren't you just beating up the guy in power armor? I'm very, very confused. I don't understand that.
Yeah, I did an interview like 10 years ago with these guys, with A. Jones, Roland Mann, and Tom Mason. R.A. Jones actually lamented that since these are based on Centaur characters, there weren't a lot of Centaur villains. Like,
really?
The Great Question was one. Well, yeah, because Centaur's Publications is old. It started publishing comics in 39, and it was done by 42.
Wow.
So not only is it old, it gets in right at the beginning, but when a lot of other publishers are sort of hitting their stride, the war's on, and they're selling a bunch, Centaur gets out. So they didn't really build this big mythos. Mostly what these guys did was fight normal bank robber guys. The Great Question was a villain. I think Iron Skull was a hero in that, but then they kind of retool him as a villain for this. But there wasn't really much going on. So yeah, you're absolutely right. They do fight a bunch of people in armor, but not the guy in armor.
Yeah.
Got a bunch of guys who look like shock troops, Jesse.
I'm down.
I'm down. I know you are.
I like that too.
Mother May I and Mr. Monday, I'm shipping them.
That's great.
I like that too, because the focus is more on the heroes and why they do this and whether or not they're going to be able to do this. And the villain is just a big generic threat. And when you finally see why they're doing this, you realize it's part of some bigger scheme. And clearly they were going to continue that arc. But again, it's not like the villain wasn't believable. I really do like the idea of just a generic, very powerful group of people showing up, disrupting it. Everyone freaks out and everyone's like, we have to combat this. And then someone's like, we got a bunch of people with powers. They might be a little crazy, but we're going to send them after. And everyone's like, yeah, fine, do that. Let's see what works.
I know the last time we got these guys together, they destroyed an entire city, but this time it'll be different. This time we're going to get the drill sergeant from Full Metal Jacket to be in charge, but we've given him a suit.
It's funny too, because you mentioned that, and it's like, yeah, we got a guy who's Captain America, but not really. And we got a guy who's Hank Pym, but not really. They have all this. You recognize that we got a guy who's kind of like Wolverine, but not really. You got all these templates.
Kind of Hawkman, but not really.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. You drill down a little bit and you're like, oh, okay, this is that extra dimension that Watchmen take on the characters. So It's definitely a product of its time, though, because it's got that deconstructionist feel of Watchmen. If someone read all that and was like, oh, yeah, what are they like when the masks come off? And one guy's got a whole family and his wife's the one who's like, no, if you think this is important, I support you. So it was good. It was a good use. I'm sure Jesse will get into this, but my favorite scene was they had the guy who, I think the Arrow is his name. He's like a golden age version of Hawkeye. And they're like, hey, do you want to be on the team? And he's like, very badly. And it's like, you can't kill anyone. He's like, well, then I'm not going to be on your team. And he just goes off and has his own adventure. And I was like, that's kind of great, actually. I want to go read that.
Yeah.
It's a good one shot. I would strongly suggest it. It's a lot of fun.
Is it? Yeah.
I'm a sucker for anyone with a bow and arrow.
And the cover is him drawing it back, and it's pointed at you, and it says, I got an arrow for you too, pal. But yeah, obviously all these characters, the Arrow, who's not quite Green Arrow, Airman, who's not quite Hawkman. I mean, they were jumping on the board, and everybody was trying to come up with their own version of whatever. Later, there's Thresher, who's not quite Aquaman or Submariner, what have you. So, of course, you're basing all these characters all these new interpretations of those characters on guys who came out in 1939. And for the most part, there are a few characters, Ark and Aura, they're originals. And the witch was a bad guy in the old days, but only showed up for a minute, and then they make her a good guy here because R.A. Jones liked it better that way.
It's funny, too, something about the Golden Age. You mentioned that there weren't many villains and that Centaur Comics wasn't around that long. If you go back, a lot of these characters fall into the public domain because they only had a handful of issues to their name. We think of Captain America. He was published consistently for years before he went into retirement. And then he was brought back not too much later, and he's been published ever since. But he's the exception, right? Most of the characters from the Golden Age, the reason there's so many in the public domain is exactly what you're saying. They saw the money that National was making hand over fist with Superman, and they were like, we can do that. We've got printing presses. This entire industry is unregulated. What do you got? And then to your point, if it doesn't immediately take off, you fold and you go do something else, especially while the war is on. This is a really interesting case study because you're probably only working with a handful of issues for all these characters, and you're doing your best to reinvent them in the modern day, but you're really not pulling from a very deep well. I always go back to probably the most famous public domain superheroes, the Black Terror, right? Every once in a while, someone brings him back. His design was one of the ones that influenced the Punisher, but this ain't them. If I had read this book in the 90s, I probably wouldn't have even realized these were pre-existing characters.
If you read the afterword where they talk about it, or if you read some of the stuff that I read that we'll talk about later in the comic scene or Wizard. But yeah, in one of the interviews, he talks, I think in both in the comic scene interview and in the back of this Protectors #1, R.A. Jones is like, yeah, well, I did my research as best I could, but these comics are hard to find, and you don't really want to pay what it would cost to get one to just like, oh, what's Man of War? So he had a few friends who helped him out here and there. But yeah, the research material was not as great as it would be, say, as if you were trying to make a new version of the Golden Age Superman.
Genesis universe. Genesis. It's designated.
Genesis does
what Nintendo.
What Marvel don't. Right?
Shouldn't have stepped on that. Genesis universe is designated as Earth 1136 according to the wiki. So anybody who is a Marvel fan and understands the Earths, there you go. 1136. I think our best starting point here is to probably explain a little bit about the characters that we're going to get into. This is a massive team book. So, Dean, I'm going to kind of rely on you. I've got short descriptions here of what they are, but you feel free to hop in with any additional tidbits.
As you wish.
And I have a fear that I may have left one or two off of here. So do not let me forget if there's somebody I did, do not let me go on without. So here we go. All right, we're going to start off with Brian O'Brien. So Brian O'Brien is currently the president of the United States. Not a huge role. You guys already mentioned this, but like you said, this was one of the very first masked superheroes.
Arguably the very first.
Yeah, so this is weird. I want to, because I only learned this recently, to tell you, everyone and their mother online is now a comic historian, right? They're digging through stuff, they're scanning stuff. No, I'm serious. It's good. I learned it. I've reached the age where instead of getting really into World War II, I'm getting really into the history of Golden Age comics. But the Clock is really interesting because he's one of these characters I had never heard of. And then I had a very good friend say, well, he was the first superhero. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then you look it up and it's like, 1936, 2 years before Superman, Centaur, whatever they're called at the time, they put out a comic book or comic strip, and it features a character in a mask. He calls himself the Clock, and he's a superhero. He does stuff. He's got a gimmick, the whole thing, and he doesn't have any superpowers. Yeah. But if you look at the period of time, there you go. I mean, there were other characters, there were other comics at the time, but they weren't wearing masks and doing superheroic stuff. Superman would kind of pull that all together a couple of years later, but it's interesting to look at this and think, well, at the time, how different was he from the Batman, right? He didn't have Bill Finger and Jerry Robinson, of course, and all these titans working on him, but for the grace of God. So
Phil Reinhardt. He is the former Night Mask, and this is a guy that I believe palled around with the Clock.
He did. And originally he's the Masked Marvel. That's his title at Centaur, but obviously they weren't use Masked Marvel because Marvel would be like, wait a second. All that.
So they use the name of a Marvel character.
I was going to say a Marvel New Universe character, but a character that a name Marvel wasn't you. Marvel using Marvel all the time, as evidenced by us having said Marvel 43 times in the last 13 seconds. But they were not using Night Mask at the time, so they would not care so much. But yeah, he was the Golden Age Night Mask, for lack of a better term, and apparently he ninja kicked people, but had no powers. Didn't need them. He's a man's man. He's if Henry Peter Gyrick was half as tough as he thought he was.
Ooh, Yes.
His first appearance, I had it listed here. First appearance was Keen Detective Funnies, Volume 2, Number 7.
Got that right over here. My Keen Detective Funnies full run.
One of the things that they did in the Protectors that I really like is, and Dean, you mentioned this before, but a lot of the characters, they invented a lot of characters. It's not like they said, this isn't Project Superpowers. They didn't limit themselves to just what was published.
Right.
But in the Golden Age, there are not a lot of female superheroes, especially the early part of the Golden Age. The later the Golden Age kind of ends, they bring in a lot of female superheroes. They introduce a lot, and then it transitions a lot into romance comics.
That was one of the good things about the good girl art craze is it probably kept superheroes going a little longer because here's sexy Phantom Lady.
Yeah. Yeah. But I liked it here where they introduced Arc and Aura and this character. And it was, all right, we don't have any female characters to pull from. And instead of just being like, oh, okay, it's Air Woman now. It's like, no, we're just going to make a new character.
We'll just go ahead and hop into Arc here real quick. Dean,
Arc.
Can you kind of give us an idea of who Arc is?
Jubilee.
Okay.
But cooler, more powerful. I don't mean that in a bad way, but she's young. I mean, she's probably a little older than Jubilee. She's 20, 21. New character created for this book to give us some more lady characters. I think she's really fun. I think she shows a point of view that is always necessary in these types of books, which is the person who just thinks it's cool as hell to be there. We've all been that person at different times in our lives, and you need somebody to always remind the reader that, bro, people don't fly with air suit machines with taloned feet. There's no dude who just can change his shape at will or whatever. So you want some sense of wonder, and Arc provides that here. I really think the character's good, and I think they do a really good job of making her, she comes across as a young person without that Bob Haney Teen Titans feel that where it's like, hey, it's young daddy-o, I'm listening to Alice in Chains. like things like that. Like, they never overdo it as far as her references. They make her feel young via her actions and responses to other people's actions. And I think R.A. Jones did a great job with the characterization of Arc through these 6 issues.
Then we have Aura after that, who is, I mean, I didn't really get a good look at her power set, but I know the one thing that stuck out to me, we talked about this with this comic, it focuses a lot on the hero and the personal relationship. She's got a husband.
She's got problems.
She's trying to work out, hey, should I be with this team or should I not be with this team?
Well, there's also a subtext there because she used to be a supermodel.
Okay.
And so she kind of pushed that stuff down to when she discovered her powers to be a housewife. But now is she having to do that again? She wants to give back. This is something she can do. She already gave stuff up once, but she's another character created for this run. Great character. Reminds me a lot of, what's her name? Iman, the late David Bowie's wife. I mean, just really powerful, wonderful black lady who's just very comfortable with herself. The only thing she can't figure out is her family, what she should do about that. And I really like that. Also, when they go to recruit her and she uses her powers, which are solidifying air, she can make force fields and think Mira, but with the air. Mira can mess with water.
Right.
That's kind of how I got that, except these are colorful. The only cool thing that Night Mask ever does is when she's messing up her whole kitchen and she's throwing everything and he catches that soda bottle in the air. Only cool thing that guy ever does. And I'm glad she gave him that opportunity.
So going back to Night Mask, we got a new Night Mask that's showing up.
Yes.
New Night Mask, which is
Daddy Issues himself.
Richard Reinhardt, Philip's son, who does not have powers, just like that.
He is not a supranormal, as they are called in this book.
So yeah, Richard Reinhardt shows up and he wants to be a part of the team and accepted in some ways, and definitely in others he is not. Some of the other team members.
He's got the big old V chest, right? The V neck plunging way down, so he's ready to disco dance with Nightwing anytime they need to.
Jeez.
Otherwise, I feel for the character. I think tries to be a good person. He's a little annoying at times. But yeah, he obviously, his connection to the Centaur Golden Age characters is his dad.
Right.
And he spends a lot of time trying to impress his dad. And when you read his handbook, he's kind of a vagabond who just had a really not the best time growing up. And
his dad doesn't want him to be this.
His dad's a piece of shit. And his dad treats him like a piece of shit. And so it's not really all that great for him all around. And he doesn't really have the best time.
It is tough to justify how.
But he's also stupid because there's one point where he charges into action and he just punches the armored guy in the face. Bro, look at your fist. Look at his head. Look at your fist. Look at his head. Okay? It's like when somebody punches somebody in the helmet when there's a football fight. He has a helmet on. What was your plan here?
Yeah, how did you think you were going to win this?
World, how does this end?
Right. Next up, Clay Carter, Man of War. First appearance, March 25th, 1941. Liberty Scouts Comics, number 2.
Yeah, classic Liberty Scouts.
Experience.
The only comic that Darry has slabbed in his collection.
That's true. That's an actual fact. No doubt.
Experienced, level-headed hero. I would assume that he's got super strength. I can't remember anything else.
He's Captain America.
Captain America.
He's Captain America if Captain America didn't appear until after the U.S. Embassy fell in Tehran.
Right. There's the Golden Age one looks like the biggest dipshit you could ever think of. I don't know what the hell is going on. This one looks pretty cool. Cool luchador pirate.
Yes. Tarantula.
Like I can dig on this look, but like the Golden Age one, you're like, oh god. If somebody was, what if Citizen V looked worse?
Oh, come on.
Come on, what?
Citizen V? You mean the updated one from the 90s? You mean the actual Citizen V?
The Golden Age one. The Golden Age Citizen V looks silly as hell.
He does. He looks ridiculous.
The updated one for Thunderbolts looks silly, but in a way you.
Yeah, that's fair.
No, I don't. And I'll be fair. Golden Age comics, it's a different barometer. All this stuff he said is new. Then there's no way to know. You're like, what if this guy had a rapier but didn't wear pants or whatever the fuck? I can't even remember. I mean, he looks wild.
I think it's interesting to look at Man of War and kind of acknowledge all the ways he's not Cap. Cap isn't just another patriotic character. Cap was created for a very specific purpose. He carries a shield. In the movie, he famously says, I don't want to kill anyone, I just hate bullies. It's this whole idea of the protective spirit of the strong against the weak. A lot of the other flag-waving characters from the 40s weren't like that. And Man of War is certainly not. Not that he's some aggressive fascist, but he carries a sword. He's very willing to take the fight to the bad guy. He's the man of war. If you read the handbook, it talks about how he actually gets his powers not from Uncle Sam or something like that, but from the Roman god of Mars.
Right.
So he's a very aggressive character. That doesn't make him a bad person, but again, it's this idea of, I look at you quickly and I think, oh, okay, you're the Cap analog of this world. It's like, no, you're not. You're probably a lot more violent. And even when during the book, he's given the opportunity to give the Avengers Assemble speech of, we have to rally and get the bad guy, but he doesn't want to. He's sitting in another room and someone else is like, get off your ass and go lead your team. This is what you're being paid for. So I thought that was great because not only does it define him in his own way and give him his own arc, but again, it goes to show you of all the characters that were published during World War II, why is Captain America still relevant to today? Well, he's a cut above the rest. So I just thought that was really good.
I mean, I think he is the Captain America analog, though, because it's different, but it's because that world is different. This is a world where the supernormals destroyed the whole place. This is a world where, like, guys like Arrow was like, hey, man, I'm working for the bad guys, and I'm working for the United States. Man of War has reconciled a lot of stuff. I think he has a lot of, this characterization of him has a lot of U.S. agent in him, but I think when he was sitting there like, I got to go talk to them, it wasn't that he didn't want to. It was that he wasn't sure how to.
Right.
He needed to be counted on in a way. He's very good at the Cyclops part of leadership. We're in the field. I point things out. You do this, blah, blah, blah.
Well said.
But the other part of it, which is where I need to inspire my team and get people to work together, well, he's not as good at that part of it. And I think that was what he was struggling with. But you're right. It's not a straight Cap analog. But when we look at this stuff, obviously inspired by Cap, very similar to the Captain America, will be the Captain America analog of the world, but certainly a lot of U.S. agent, a lot more of that in him, but not enough to where he's an asshole. He's still like, I've killed lots of people. The government doesn't want you to kill people anymore. All right, well, that's good. I'd rather not. What if they want you to again? Well, I guess to kill people again. And, we're having a pointless conversation here, aren't we, in his mind? Right. To an extent, the Cap would be like, I'll never accept that. So that's a big difference. But yeah, you're right. It's not a straight analog.
Yeah, but that's good too, because it's very practical. Yeah. And it's a product of its time. It's funny too, because this is 1992. So we're 10 years away from the Ultimates, which would take this concept of a government-backed super team where everyone was super comfortable murdering bad people to its hilarious conclusion.
Right.
But this, in a lot of ways, set up for that, right? Youngblood's the same thing. Youngblood's a government-backed team.
I was going to say, contemporarily, Youngblood's doing something very similar.
Yep.
But also putting the American Idol spin on it.
Yeah, exactly.
In a very genius way. way. And Rob Liefeld, and you can say anybody can disagree, he's a fucking genius for that, for not just doing Youngblood at the time, but also stuff like Bloodstrike, where he's like, listen, for all this stuff that the government's putting in front of you, here's Badrock on late night with David Letterman making jokes and pretending to have a free throw contest or some shit. The government also has an undead strike force that is going to kill any superpowered guy that gets out of line that doesn't toe that neat celebrity line they've built.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking about earlier comparing what we're getting here with the Protectors and Image, what was going on over at Image Comics at the time. And Protectors to me didn't feel as, I want to use the word rushed. Image Comics was in your face, and we are going to get right to the next story. Right here, we got a two-parter that's going to be...
I think the word you're looking for is developed.
Okay, I'll take...
Because you're not saying that Jim Lee was shitting the bed and just getting the pages out as fast as he could. But obviously that wasn't the case because the books were fucking late. No offense, they just were. But things just happen, and they happen because they happen. When you, in the different articles I read about this, and even in the back of Protectors #1, they planned this out
exactly
about 8 months ahead of time. We've been working on this for almost a year before it came out. And then for several months, #1 is done 6 months. By the time #1's hitting, they're starting to work on #3, and all of it was outlined. And this is where we're going, and this is what we're going to do. Originally, it was going to be a 6-issue miniseries, so that you can really see that how this works out, and that everything works together. It flows well, and will come to an end.
Mm-hmm. Next up, Amazing Man, a powerful hero with a more aggressive and violent approach to superheroics.
Yeah.
Causes some friction among the team members and the public. First appearance, Amazing Man Comics #5. How do you not show up until the 5th issue of Amazing Man Comics and your name be Amazing Man? You want to explain that shit to me?
It was probably a different title before that, or they may have just started with #5. There were no. If you started a publication, magazine, comic book, or otherwise, you paid the tax thing to do it.
Yeah.
And if you cancel it and started a new one, you had to pay that again. But if you just change title, you have to pay it again. So a lot of people would just change titles. Sometimes there's no Wiz Comics #1 as far as I know. Wiz Comics #2 is the first Captain Marvel, Shazam. Wiz Comics #1, they published like 10 of them in a small act can to get the trademark. But for all intents and purposes, Wiz Comics #2 is where that starts. So it's
I don't think any survived, certainly.
It's a very different world as far as there was much more. I mean, literally, companies would be like, we don't want to pay our bills, so we're just going to close this office. And we'll open up an office across the street. We were super good comics. Now we're super fine comics. Amazing Man, by the way, one of the old, probably the most famous Centaur character, in all honesty. He was recently redone. I forget what indie redid him. It was around 6 or 7 years ago, put out 12 issues of an Amazing Man comic. Not bad stuff.
Really? I don't remember. Are you sure you're not thinking of Peter Cannon?
I'm 100% sure I'm not thinking of Peter Cannon.
All right.
I was Facebook friends with the gentleman who put this out, and I feel bad I can't remember his name now. He's a very nice guy.
If none of you guys are going to point this out, I'm going to bring it up. The Amazing Man is Iron Fist. Okay.
Rip off the Iron Fist origin. Okay. I was going to say, this is one of the first times in comic books where we start to see that Orientalism, as Edward Said would put it, pop up. Here's this advanced mystic culture that Asians know that other people can't, and they bestow this knowledge of their secret society, etc., which Roy Thomas would 100% rip off for Iron Fist. So in some ways, not only did he not create Wolverine, maybe he didn't even create Iron Fist. Don't let Roy Thomas tell you otherwise. He did not create Wolverine. That's an aside. We don't talk about it any further than that.
Well, also,
fired up.
On the Iron Fist book that came out around the time of Marvel Civil War, Ed Brubaker and Matt Fraction made the connection specific. So since Amazing Man is in the public domain, they took a version of Amazing Man and put him into the comics as a Golden Age version.
Is that in the Immortal Iron Fist?
The book was called The Immortal Iron Fist, and the character.
I've been that forever.
They didn't want to call him Amazing Man. They called him the Green Mist. But nonetheless, it was John Aman because there was nothing legally preventing him. Again, you couldn't make a comic book called The Green Mist, but it was the same character. And they hung out, and he's very similar to the way he is here. He's incredibly powerful, but after being alive for 80 years, he's kind of a dick. And Iron Fist, for all his faults, is not a dick. He's actually a very personable Buddhist in his civilian life.
Right.
So there's a lot of interesting friction there. But I had no idea about this character. I had no idea until he showed up there. And I don't know, there was an article on Newsarama or CBR or something, and they've resurrected the world's most random Golden Age character. And then you look at it and it's, oh, yeah, okay, great. You were a white guy. You went to the quote-unquote Far East. You were better at it than all the people who've lived there for generations.
Right.
You brought that knowledge back to America, and you were the greatest superhero of all time. It starts here. It's so interesting to say this thing was only published for a couple of issues, and we're still talking about it 80 years later.
It's not unsimilar to the Doctor Strange origin either.
I will say, I
don't think they're exactly the same. There's certainly overlap.
I will die on this hill. I think Steve Ditko intended for Doctor Strange to be Asian.
I agree. I think you're right. Gallant Comics is the one who published Amazing Man several years back. I can't remember, around 2015, 2016. I feel bad. I can't remember the guy's name. We're Facebook friends. He's a nice guy. Oh, well, Gallant Comics Amazing Man. It's out there.
Check it out. So the handbook comes out in November of 92. And as we're talking here, of course, there's a lot of history that precedes all these characters, but they do not get caught up in any of that. In these first 6 issues, I should say. But it's funny because when you get the handbook, it says November of 92. I don't know if it was on sale a month before that or not, but you don't have it in your hands when you're reading at least the first issue. You got to get to issue 3 before the handbook drops and you start learning the history. But you start to see these characters who have all of their Amazing Man with his attitude and this rage that he has. There's no explanation for it. And that's not a bad thing. That's something that fleshes this character out and keeps you on the hook. What the hell's this guy's problem?
I mean, there's problems from the start. They pick him up from a freaking insane asylum.
Right.
It's great. I do that we are in representation of mentally ill people. Everybody knows I struggle with PTSD and bipolar disorder and OCD. So it's really cool to see somebody who like, hey, you can still be a hero even if like you have these challenges. I really like that. I think you're right. It's something you're not supposed to know everything at this point. You can tell you're not supposed to know everything.
Yeah. All right. Moving on from Amazing Man, one of the more popular characters, I think that for some reason I associate with the Malibu universe, the Ferret.
The Ferret. Yeah, big old Golden Age guy. He was a cop in the Golden Age who, for some reason, he's like, I'm the Ferret now because I'm going to ferret out the criminals. Also, I have the powers of a ferret and I can fly. The Ferret's also an asshole. He can do everything Wolverine can do as near as we can tell. He's the third strongest protector. He's in a rock band where he convinces ladies to have sex with him a bunch. And he mostly just makes snide comments, but somehow is not as annoying as Wolverine, which also makes him not as cool. But I like him a lot. And R.A. Jones actually said he was supposed to be their Wolverine character.
Oh, was he?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they weren't making any bones about what they were doing on some level and then that's where you start and then you grow from there.
Go back in the archives, folks, and check out me and Chris Armstrong talking about Street Fighter, where the Ferret showed up to face off with E. Honda, Eternal Man, Sorcerer, who joins the Protectors here. And I don't have much of a history on this guy, but I mean, I assume
he is a Golden Age character from Centaur, and I don't think he was in many books. And his power apparently appears to be being mean to his girlfriend, concubine, and his butler. And also at one point he shoots a bunch of webs around somebody. I guess that's what he does. But he's a master of magic apparently, and very, very Dr. Fate, Dr. Strange, Dr. Weirdish.
Then we have Airman, who we kind of already mentioned a few times already. Power of flight. He's got big wings.
It's like a suit, actually.
Next up is Mighty Man, a hero with a family. This is the guy that is our Hank Pym analog, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Grows and shrinks, and again, a Golden Age character and everything. I mean, pretty much very straightforward in the handbook where he loves America more than any of these other protectors. And he's not even from here. Okay, cool. Thanks, man.
Yeah, unlike Hank Pym, though, able to hold down a loving relationship and a stable home life. And he seems to have people who actually care about him, not from someplace other than guilt.
Because he paints. He found an outlet for his aggression. We first see him, he's just in the backyard painting, doing his thing. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, speaking of Mighty Man, there's an interesting relationship or ex-relationship. I don't know what's going on between these two. The Witch.
Yeah, the Witch was a villain in the Centaur era back in the day. She only appeared in 2 comics, I want to say. R.A. Jones was like, I like the name, I didn't like anything else. Made her a hero, and her problem is she works. Have you ever heard of the Shroud in Marvel Comics?
Yeah, sounds familiar.
Yeah, he's a good guy that a lot of good guys think are a bad guy.
Okay.
Well, he told them he was a bad guy, right? That was his whole gimmick. Didn't he tell everyone? Wasn't he like, I am the Shroud, I'm a super villain?
He totally made out he was a crime lord. He'd get in a fight like the West Coast Avengers. Actually, I'm a good guy. We're all a good guy. I promise I'm a good guy.
Someone would pull him to an alley, and he'd be like, I'm on your side. I'm doing this so that I can reveal their plan. He would
save someone mysteriously. I don't know how I got away, and then eventually it would be revealed. The Witch is kind of like that. She works in that, like the Green Hornet style, Shroud style, kind of both sides a little bit. She is a good guy, but she doesn't mind when people think she's a bad guy, and that means she sometimes does a few bad guy things. And Mighty Man just ran afoul of her. Really just has a crush on her.
I got vibes.
Kissy.
I got vibes. I did. I thought I think that there was a relationship or something in the past, or at least that's what it felt. He did not want to be around her, and she wanted to be around him an awful lot. And I don't know if that's just because she likes manipulating him and finds it pretty easy, because I think she makes that comment at one point.
She thinks it's funny to troll the guy.
That's hilarious. All right. One of the coolest looking characters. I mean, there's quite a few cool looking characters here with the Protectors, but Gravestone. I mean, you throw a skull on somebody's face.
Yep.
My goodness.
Glowing red eyes.
Mysterious figure. He is the one that shows up in the bedroom of the president, right?
He's the one who tells the clock what time it is. It's time for the Protector. Gravestone is based on the Phantom of the Fair, which is a hero that was solved crimes at the World's Fair, but then that stopped. There was a lot of World's Fair shit. The first World's Finest, I think, has to do with the World's Fair.
It does.
Wow.
It does, yeah.
So, like, it was
Sandman, too.
Yeah, Sandman too. So it was just a big deal. Now he would carry on as just the Phantom, Phantom, but to avoid confusion with what's the guy, Lee Falk? Is that his name? Lee Falk's Phantom?
Yeah, Lee Falk.
PH. Yeah. But to avoid confusion, they renamed him, and Gravestone's probably a better name. It's probably one of the most 90s names they have. It's probably
absolutely
the most 90s character they have. He's just doing Ghost Rider shit, but acting the Phantom Stranger while he does it. It's really cool.
Yeah.
He's like, I just gave you the pin and stare, but now I'm gone. Did you ride your flaming motorcycle away? Now I just fucking disappeared. I'm Gravestone.
Well, then let's talk about our villain. And I guess he has a very generic steel army, but Mr. Monday.
Yeah.
What a villain here. Can you maybe shed some light as to why Mr. Monday?
I think, R.A. Jones created, I know he and whoever artist created the character, and it just sounds good. When you look at him, you're like, yeah, that's Mr. Monday, sure. Maybe it's just that Mondays suck. Although I maintain that Tuesdays are worse than Mondays, because on your Monday, you've been off for a couple of days, so you go back to work, and it's kind of different, so it goes by. Tuesday, you're like, what the fuck is this? I just did this yesterday, and I got to do it again tomorrow? But yeah, I think it's just a cool name. He looks cool, does cool stuff. The Steel Army, obviously, people who weren't good enough to get into cybernetic shock troops.
True.
So they came over here. Listen, you're not good enough on the image side, but have you heard of Malibu? Have you heard of Malibu Comics? There's some business for you over there. No, I'm just kidding. They really do look really, really sleek and cool. It would have been, I like the Steel Army. Maybe they should have been the Steel Army spelled S-T-E-A-L.
Oh.
They're just stealing stuff left and right. Like Ricky Henderson's nickname, the Man of Steel.
The Man of Steel.
Yeah.
And as far as motivations go, this is just a terrorist group, right? I mean,
well, Mr. Monday's working for a higher power who's got machinations going on. It seems more random than it is.
All right, guys.
And that power is the Great Question.
The Great Question.
Who is Amazing Man's arch enemy.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, they're from the same. One of the few villains from the old Centaur days, and Amazing Man's #1 villain, and I guess Iron Fist as well, as it turns out.
That's canon.
I've got a synopsis. Let me get through this real quick. In our first issue, the group called the Steel Army, led by Mr. Monday, attacks a police precinct in Washington, D.C., prompting the government to assemble a team of superheroes called the Protectors to deal with this threat. The team consists of heroes like Man of War, Ark, Gravestone, Airman, and Philip Reinhardt's son, Richard, the new Night Mask, who takes on, the president wants the team to operate with a no-kill clause. That's important, guys. You cannot kill anybody, much to the dismay of some members like Amazing Man. In the subsequent issues, the team grows as they recruit more heroes like Eternal Man, Ferret, Mighty Man, though not without some internal tensions and concerns. again, between the team and the public. The Protectors engaged the Steel Army in several battles, but the public death of Richard Reinhardt, broadcasted death of Richard Reinhardt at the hands of Mr. Monday shakes the team. Amazing Man's violent outburst also damages the team's public image. As the team struggles to overcome these challenges, we learn that Mr. Monday is actually taking orders from the mysterious villain called the Great Question, who is plotting further revenge.
I love that name, too.
Oh, the Great Question?
The only better question name in all the comic books is the amalgam of Kingpin and the Riddler, the Big Question. No, that shit is fire.
I'll agree. But yes, the Great Question, who is still plotting further revenge, especially after the final battle, and I think it was the 6th issue, where Mr. Monday and the Steel Army are finally defeated.
Yeah, they used their friend's funeral as a trap.
Yes, they did.
Is that okay? I mean, I think he'd be okay with it, but there's probably something immoral about that. Then again, these people attacked a funeral, so I guess whatever.
The series follows the Protectors as they navigate the challenges of being a government-sponsored superhero team, dealing with the internal conflicts, public scrutiny, and the machinations of their powerful enemies. The death of Richard Reinhardt serves as a major turning point that tests the team's resolve and unity as they continue their mission to protect the city from the Steel Army's attacks. So there you go. That is all 6 issues, very, like I said, in 3 paragraphs. But I've got some talking points here. First off, Gravestone. Again, great name. We kind of talked about it already. I assume he's a superhero of the First Order, and he's talking to the president to get things together because he wants a superhero team. Is there anything? He's very mysterious. I don't understand.
I think he's lonely. I do. Okay. I think he's lonely. I think these Grim Avenger types, they were all big in the 40s. He's running around the fair, right? A lot of people in the fair. And 1992 rolls around. And he's like, oh, hey, all right, you might have need of me. I got my suit pressed.
I hate terrorism, but this sure is a good excuse to get the boys back together.
Yeah, it's so crazy. Everyone gets back together on the Protectors, and at no point does someone say, wait, were you there when an entire time was vaporized? And they're all like, no, that wasn't me. That was some other supernatural that's not here. Definitely not here. Right. That was the Arrow. That was definitely that guy in Texas who has no superpowers.
He shot a neutron arrow straight up, and then he just ran. I think his purposes get revealed as the story goes on, and also in his own book. You're not supposed to know them at this point.
I like it
but
too.
I do think
Gravestone.
part of it is these are his friends. I do think that is part of it.
Yeah.
What were you saying, Darry?
I was just going to say Gravestone and the Eternal Man, they're a good way of expanding the lore, right?
Yes.
Like there's a very small amount of characters, but when they meet, they're like, oh, hey, you're 1,000 years old. You're 10,000 years old. There's this idea of if this book is going to continue, the world has to be more fictional. People are getting superpowers when they hit puberty with no explanation, and we can't use the word mutant. So we're going to need a livelier, richer world. And I think Gravestone hints at that. You never see him without his mask. You're never given an origin. He's mysterious. He's spooky. You know, he might have been the basis for Lucifer, for all you know. But I thought that was a good setup. Again, I haven't read 7 through 20. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if he's like, oh, hey, now that we're all together and I know I can trust you guys, we have to deal with my arch enemy who hasn't been around since the fall of Rome or something like that.
Well, there's a reason he got his own ongoing. He's an interesting character. And I think also in his ongoing, we learned that if you kill him, he just gets better.
Yeah, he's definitely got that feel of, I killed you. And he's like, I know, it doesn't take. What do you want from me? Like, I cannot die. I get bored very easily. What if we do when we're fighting Iron Men terrorists? Great, good, let's do it.
Slams down a box of Wheaties. I ate this morning, okay, buddy? All right.
Another aspect of the lore you kind of mentioned there, Darry, is the event that occurred in 86.
Frankston, Virginia.
Yeah, where a town apparently was destroyed, and at that point, the government was like, all supernormals are going to retire. And they did. Other than the fact that there's this massive battle, you don't get much of an explanation as to what occurred, which is great. Again, it's another rock in the foundation.
Yeah, it's a plot thread you can come back to later when it's time. Which they do. I believe that all gets fleshed out throughout this book and the other. You know, it's important to note that there were 3, we talked about it a little bit, but it's easy to forget. There were 3 ongoing titles that went along with this one in particular. You had the Ferret, Man of War, and Gravestone, and they all had things that, in addition to specials, but they all had things that would get, stuff that could be in this book might wind up playing a role in one of those other books and vice versa.
Okay. All right. We have, again, we got Phil and Richard and their tension there. Richard trying to just join the team, and his dad's like, all right, well, I don't really want you to do this. And I think at one point somebody, maybe it's the ferret or somebody else goes up to Philip and was like, you need to get this kid off the team before he gets killed.
It is the ferret.
Is it the ferret? And
yeah,
because the ferret's completely against that.
Calls him out.
Right.
It's like, man, you can't handle this. And he's like, I can too. And then he tries to punch the fucking ferret. And then the ferret mildly beats him up. And then he lays a smackaroo on Marcia, who doesn't want it, because the only character that could see less clearly in all of comic books is Daredevil. So doesn't realize that he can't do this. Just he doesn't want to kiss him. Most of these people aren't his friends. His dad hates him.
Yeah, it's a kind of a rough. This is a character that's kind of going through it and not going through it in the best of ways. Thinking that he could become a hero, it feels definitely somebody that'd be like, oh, I'm going to join this team. I'm going to show him what I got, and then everybody's going to love me. And no,
especially my dad.
Daddy issues. But yeah, Ferret comes up to Phil and is like, dude, you get this guy off the team before he gets killed. He's an adult. He can make his own decisions.
He's a man, and a man's got to pay for his mistake.
Yeah, wait till fucking issue 5.
Oh, right. Well, he doesn't care.
No,
and that's in front of me. He's watching it with the president.
That's what's sad about that whole thing, is that he's watching it, and the president, clearly this is something that is going through the minds of the writers, because the president makes a comment, he has internal dialogue where he's like, damn, this guy just watched his son get killed, and all he can do is think about the protectors. And
they're his real kids now.
That's pretty fucked up, man. That is fucked up.
That's how he's acting. I mean, listen, I think he does have more grief than is being shown, but at the same time, it's hard to feel bad for him too much. I mean, you feel bad his son died, but you also, man, you're kind of an asshole to him and could have prevented it. And it's little things, too, when he finds out that he's not going to walk again, and his son's like, Dad, I'm so sorry. He's like, I'm not an person. You know, like, I'm sorry that your son had sympathy because you're in a car wreck and you're paralyzed. What the fuck? What a mistake. How dare he? What the fuck?
It's such a straightforward story, though, because he's going to die from the second he shows up. It's one of these, it's simple, right? He shows up, he's got no superpowers. I also had no superpowers, and I retired. And he's like, I'm definitely going to do this. And it's like, well, you're making your own decision. You're going to die. And you're also the youngest character. You try to make out with that woman. You constantly are making every mistake that everyone's going to feel bad about in the ongoing book. You're Phil Coulson. You're what if Rick Jones had died in Avengers 4. It's just, it's so funny, but it works. It nails it because it
does.
Yeah, they use the communications mishap. They really lay the groundwork. And even though it's coming, you can see that train driving down the tracks. You cannot prevent it. At no point does Nightmask 2 make a decision that would save his own life. And no one around him is able to get to him, including his father, who, again, one word of, you really did me proud. You need to sit this out. You're the water is way above your head. And he'd have backed off and he'd probably still be alive, but he doesn't. And at the end, all it does is make his father want the team to work more. It's crazy.
Yeah. That 5th issue, I mean, we can go ahead and talk about it.
Plaster it all over it. There's Nightmask on the cover with a big hole, literally hole through the comic.
That's
blood all around him and everything. Yeah. So, there was no secret ever that this guy was definitely the new character on Hill Street Blues, and he was probably not going to live.
Is this the only cover gimmick, or I shouldn't say, this is not a cover gimmick. This is a comic gimmick, because the hole is all the way through the comic. Any other comics that you guys can think of in this gimmick era that had a actual hole in them?
Funny you should ask.
Oh, I'm glad you've got the answer to this.
So, around the same time, Shannon Wheeler, I believe, did a Jab number 5, and he shot the comic. This comic is done with press. In my interview, I got to talk to Tom Mason about it, and he was like, we're always looking for things, and our distributor, our printer guy was like, well, we got this press. We can make a perfect hole through something. Okay, well, yeah, we can do something with that. And then Roland Mann, who was the editor, he's like, oh, I remember it because I had to move all these fucking panels around. Make sure this hole doesn't make sure it makes sense. Make sure this doesn't make anything.
Oh, it'd be a pain in the ass. Yeah.
Well, around the same time, Shannon Wheeler is like, I'm going to shoot this guy. They just stacked it up and shot it. And apparently, I believe there were different calibers. They shot it with a 22 and a 45. And I think they shot it with 12 gauge and just bagged the
pieces.
the pieces. If memory serves. But he was steamed because to him, Malibu was the big leagues, and the big leagues was ripping his idea off. He says he told it to R.A. Jones or somebody they overheard him at a convention, and then R.A. took it back and said this happened. R.A. said that didn't happen, doesn't remember what they're talking about. So it's a bunch of, I guess, he shot, she shot. But there's no way to know, but it was a bone of contention. Wow. And Tom Mason's like, no, we didn't rip anything off. Well, why would we, you know? And also, they just shot the comic for the most part, although they said they shot the comic, and that comic had more to do with the actual hole. The hole's just punched through this thing. It looks good on the cover, but for the most part, the rest of the book, it's not really the biggest deal. But the hole in Jab, and I think it was Jab number 5, actually was part of this.
Okay, all right.
So,
I mean, that's
Shannon Wheeler created too much coffee, man. If you've seen anything that he's done, that's.
I know you're talking about there.
I know you do. You're a very well-cultured individual.
Indeed.
You are. I agree with that.
I need to know too much coffee, man.
I absorb everything. I'm a big giant sponge under this hat. Precisely. The cover to this, the comic itself has the hole, and you can see that we see the new Night Mask. Richard is shot and he's dead.
This issue, a protector dies. I wonder which one. Which protector with the big old Nightwing V plunge is the one that's going to get it.
But man, it's
very well done.
It's done well. It's done where the public, first off, is already very wary about superheroes, and we got a supranormal villain that showed up now, and that's what obviously has caused the protectors to come back. And this super villain decides to broadcast the death of this hero, of this protector, and then what do we have? The final shot, if I remember correctly, is a one-page splash where there is a dead Night Mask laying up against the wall with nothing but Monday rules written in blood.
Right.
On the wall.
Airman's like, where is he? I said we'd take care of him. The like, well, look over there. I guess we didn't do a very good job.
Fucking ferret. Gosh. So, yeah, I mean, that is, I think, as far as out of these 6 issues, that's the moment that makes me go, man, this is getting really good. Then we have the big showdown between the Steel Army in the final issue, Steel Army and Mr. Monday. And I had to read how Mr. Monday pretty much lost his legs a couple times because I was like, what the fuck just happened?
Amazing Man just rips him apart, right? It turns out that he didn't have any legs.
I was like, whoa, wait a second. And
it's such a great moment, though, when they pull the ruse on him. I love it when Mr. Monday's like, yes, I'm so smart. He's like, you're not as smart as you think you are. You just fell for one of the oldest superhero tricks in the book.
Yeah. The Mighty Man who was in disguise as the president. They go into a mausoleum and they fight it out. And that's where Mr. Monday realizes, oh shit, I'm in for it now, and tries to get away, runs, and Mighty Man grabs his legs and rips them off. I was expecting Mr. Monday to kind of use some kind of, jetpack or something to fly away.
Get some of those crane spider legs to come out.
Something. Yeah. Instead, he's laying on the ground, and that's it. The paramedics strap him to a gurney and wheel his ass on out of there. The fight's over.
I really like that, though, because for the first couple of issues, this guy's being built into a big bad. Whether or not he isn't important. He just has enough technology, has enough power that he can overpower any of the normal people that he encounters. And then when he finally deals with the superheroes, they just beat the crap out of him, right? They tear his legs off. He doesn't have any legs. He's clearly been in a terrible accident. And I kind of like that because it shows how much pageantry is involved with all of it. And again, I go back to the Ultimates where you would see a lot of this later, where it's the idea of you build a super team full of gods, full of men who can do things that no other man can do. And it's like, if you don't constantly have people fighting for them, they're not going to have jack shit to do. And the Protectors is the same way. Once all these people get together as a team and one of their own has fallen and they encounter the bad guy, they deal with him pretty quickly. And I thought that was great because that was a great way of saying the idea of a super team is way more powerful and way more dangerous than a bunch of mooks in hired power armor, right? Once you're taking them down, it's like, well, what's this team going to do? Another supervillain better show up, or they might think that no-kill rule's, optional.
Right.
I think also it shows just how powerless people who bully actually are, because the only thing we ever see Mr. Monday do up to this point is he goes into that cop shop after his Steel Army has decimated it. Then he talks trash to the one cop who's living. He kills Night Mask in front of God and everybody, and he's like, "You can't even hurt me, boy. I've got this power suit." Just keeps bionic brain blasting him and everything. But then when it gets down to it, he's just a scared coward who can't do anything. It's almost later on, if you've ever seen the movie Death Proof, at the end of Death Proof, where when Keith Russell, they get him out of the car and everything, the ladies just kick the shit out of him. It's no big deal because he can't do anything. Once you've taken away this aura of invincibility, you've taken away this aura that he is bigger and badder. He's actually not.
Yeah.
So I think that was a neat meta text on that too.
Yeah, the assumption is you won't be able to fight back, but once you do, you find out, oh no, the response you've created to this threat is far more dangerous than the threat itself. Right. I think that's really good. Yeah. And it's thematically consistent. I mean, again, they don't go into the reasons that Livingstone or whatever the town was called was destroyed in this arc, but it's this idea. Thank you. But it's this idea.
R.I.P. Let's have a little respect for the people of Winston, Virginia, can we please? And also Clairton, West Virginia, where Rom was from, where they all got ice.
Oh yeah.
R.I.P.
Stamford, Connecticut. I was working in Stamford, Connecticut the day that issue of Civil War dropped down. Yeah. That is my fault.
That's your fault.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Stamford was class war.
Yeah. Right.
Just kidding.
Who knew Nitro could do that, really? Apparently he was addicted to drugs.
Everybody.
Oh, yeah. Well, hey, listen.
Yeah.
I loved this book. I thought it was great. I really did. I'm glad I read it now as an adult because all the characters are very nuanced. One thing I really liked is this isn't the last time this idea would be done. I don't even know if it was the first time that it would be done. This idea of taking a bunch of public domain characters, and I don't know. No one except for Roy Thomas has nostalgia for these guys, but saying, well, what if they do? I'm serious. I'm not trying to be mean.
Eclipse had Airboy.
Yeah, Eclipse did Airboy.
They made the little universe with Airboy and the Heap and something else. I can't remember. Yeah. But yeah, this was kind of the first. It's kind of what you're talking about. First, let's bring back these public domain characters that were all centrally located and redo it in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's this idea of DC over the years would buy companies and they would try to put all the characters together and make something out of them. The quality characters were never called the Freedom Fighters until DC was like, well, we already got a premier superhero team. What are we going to do with these guys? It was a Squadron of Justice when they finally shelled out the $12 to buy Fawcett. They always do this. So when you get to the Protectors, it's, well, we got the Centaur characters. What are we going to do with them? There have been others. Project Superpowers, most famously from Dynamite, 10 years
I still need to read that.
No, you don't. It's absolute garbage. And I say that as
I just like the characters, so I would probably, whether it's good or not, I would like to read it.
I would say if anyone listening has not read Project Superpowers and they're like, oh yeah, I mean to do that, just Google it, because there's these beautiful Alex Ross drawings and he's got all his pitches and all his ideas and everything else. But the story, nothing comes of the story. The story goes on for years. Nothing comes of it. And the interior art is not Alex Ross, but I'm sure you can very easily find the previews he did of what if the Lev Gleason Daredevil came out in 2010, whatever it was. So, but anyway, my point was I thought that this was really well done because it said, okay, well, how can we make these characters unique? Well, they're not going to be the Justice League, right? The base they have is the USS Jefferson, which is moored in a river off the coast of Washington, D.C., and they constantly complain about how they don't have enough technology. No one on this team is Tony Stark or the Atom or the Martian Manhunter. No one shows up and says, I have an alien spaceship no one was using. It's very rudimentary. We haven't even mentioned the Mafia subplot.
Oh, I've got some things to say about
so I love that. That felt like a very early Marvel idea where it's like we have a headquarters, but nothing works. We're trying our best. Nothing's working the way we want. The Man of War is always drawn with a sword. He never once pulls that out in the
It also feels very governmental.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm not even saying that too disparagingly, but it doesn't matter what the program is, whether it's to give kids free breakfast or to make a new hyper missile that will kill everyone in the world 13 times, because we already don't do that enough. the start of the process is always arduous, and this should work, and it's not. And we need 10 guys. We thought we could get by with 7, etc. Yeah. It's probably the nature of any beast, any project on some level, but it sticks out more when it's the government.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because you don't normally see that with superheroes, right? Superheroes, the paradigm is someone like Cap or Superman shows up, grabs a bunch of people, and they beat the bad guy, right? And they figure out what they need to do that. But here it's very specific scenes where there's a no-kill rule, and then someone argues with that and says, we have to be able to kill. And it's, no, if you do that, we're going to lose the moral argument. And then they talk about there's an A team and a B team. I love the idea of Airman clocking out, getting to 6 o'clock and being like, I don't have any overtime scheduled, so it's time to take the wings off. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that that's the core, but I like that this team incorporates all of that nonsense because it separates them from everything else. It's got a very Justice League Detroit feel or something like that, and I really appreciated that. The other thing was at one point, I love this because, again, things have only gotten worse in the ensuing 30 years, but there's one scene where they literally argue everyone on this team needs insurance, and the president's like, I don't know if I can swing that, and he's like, no, that's not I'm not asking you. I'm telling you, they need life insurance.
Why would they do otherwise? They can just go not put lives on the line. Like, what's the point?
It's so funny because it's such an obvious thing, and it's again we've talked about it before. I just assume the Maria Stark Foundation gives all the Avengers health insurance, but no one ever talks about that. And it's here where it's no. Ark is 18; she can't be on her parents' policy anymore. You're going to give her insurance, and as a result, the next time a super team tries to blow up the Lincoln Memorial, she's going to throw lightning at them and hopefully not die. So I liked all that stuff because I really felt the end result was a team that was just different enough from everything, certainly being published at the time, that it was, I understand why this worked. And they really carved out their own space. It didn't feel reductive, and it didn't feel a carbon copy of something else. I love this era. I love 1992. I started reading comics in 1991. I was a little kid, and I was flipping through here. The house ads, the bullet cover, the gimmick, the art style, the transition of all that, everything else. I couldn't get enough of this. It was a very pleasant surprise, and I would heartily recommend it to anyone. Not that the damn thing's ever going to be in print again, but still.
Right. But it's easily found. I know number one sold 90,000 copies, so they probably printed 160 or so. Early on, it was a sales success, which I think was a pleasant surprise to you. And I don't think that Malibu thought it would be a failure, but the sales were a little better early than they even thought they would be. It's a very pleasant surprise. Not an unpleasant surprise. The guy from Madison Square Garden, the Carnage concert with the knife. Nobody needed that. Carnage was already there. Everybody's already traumatized. Now this guy's got a huge knife. What are we doing here, bro? What are we doing here?
Oh, man. This is late in the game for him to be showing up, and I was not expecting him. I should have.
Yeah, I'd be ready for it.
I busted it out really early, too.
I mean, anyway, go ahead, continue.
I think I put in most of what I was thinking in the interjections. I will say my absolute favorite character is Eternal Man, right? That's his name, because I love the idea. What? Zardy. Yeah.
The Eternal Man, yes.
Again, it's one of these things where they hint at it with Doctor Strange occasionally, that he's this absolute scumbag because he has absolute power that he got through studying and learning. He's this very high opinion of himself. He's the equivalent of a tenured professor at Oxford. So he treats the help terrible. He treats everyone else terrible. But then when he goes out into the field, he's very vain, and he creates this glamour of being a very young, handsome man with this flowing cape that probably never creases the wrong way. And I thought that was great. I love the idea of this immortal sorcerer, this Dr. Fate, this Dr. Strange, this Spectre, Phantom Stranger type, who's just like still grounded in every awful aspect that we as people have. And I thought that was really cool. I also love the idea that he doesn't seem to have any limitations on his power. Keep talking about Amazing Man.
Well, he couldn't find Night Mask.
Yeah, exactly. It's whatever the story calls for. So I
float, go into a trance for a little bit.
Yeah. My astral form will find him. Don't worry about that. But it's cool too because he clearly doesn't need the money. He's one of these immortals who's I don't want to be bored, and you guys are going to make sure that for your brief lifespan, I am not bored, and then I can go back to doing whatever it was I was going to do. So I thought that was great. Again, it breaks it up from everything else, and it helps play into the team's dynamic. The only real complaint I will have is I don't understand the character of the witch. This thing with her pheromones. Were you guys following this?
She gives off a lot of pheromones. Spider-Woman has a similar power.
No, I know, but with Spider-Woman, it's always she gets worried or excited or something, and suddenly all the guys around her are acting weird. But they keep pointing out that the witch, if you're a woman and you're around her, you just become mean. That was the part that are pointing that out. That was the only. I wouldn't even say it was a complaint. I'm sure they were going to use that for some narrative purpose, but I read that and I was like, "That's weird. I wasn't expecting that."
So. I missed that in the book. I really did.
The handbook.
It's more in the handbook. It's more. I think the reason I even thought to look up the handbook was the witch had a handbook page in one of the issues, and I was like, "What is this?" And apparently, there's a 30-page handbook that had all the characters that we met and a couple that they didn't get to unless you read all the ancillary stuff. And it very prominently says not only does the witch, who doesn't appear to have any magic abilities, make men act weird, it makes women act weird too. And I was like, that's odd. But again, it's not bad, just one of those things where it's, I'm curious the story they intended to tell with such a prominent characteristic.
All right, Dean, you've been excited to talk about the Protectors and the story. And if we haven't covered anything, here's the time.
All right, good. Got a lot of things to say. All right. Love the Protectors. I really, really dig all 6 of these issues. I got a couple things to say. A couple drawbacks here. Number one, so what union slowdown causes static in walkie-talkies? I work in broadcasting. I have no idea what that could possibly mean. They're slowing down. Also, let's talk about unions for a second. Very pro-union guy here.
Yes.
So if the unions, first off, you've already signed a contract, so why are they having a slowdown? That's weird. This would all be done on the front end of everything. There's no reason for them to do it unless you're not adhering to your end of the contract. So the easiest way to deal with the problem of the union slowdown would probably be talking to the union folks and being like, hey, what's the problem? Oh, you asked for more water breaks. We said we'd give them. We're not giving them. Let's get to the bottom of this, blah, 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 blah. Instead, he just goes to the mafia. He just goes to the mafia just immediately. And still the mafia controls every union in the world. This is a federal union, too. The unions the mafia has the least likely to have a lot of influence in. I'm not saying none, but I am saying that that's one that would be harder to get into. What are we talking about here? What is it? Also, when they go, they're like, we should have told somebody where we're going. He's taking Marcia, who he just met. She met the president. She may as well meet Mr. Mafia. And she's nobody.
Who he's old friends with, right? Did I read that correctly?
Old friends, yeah. They're friends.
Yeah. They're hugging and everything.
The original Night Mask, who's pals with this Mafia Don.
But doesn't that make a weird bit of sense? That would have been a good thing to show the audience, where it's, why was a non-powered guy so good at his job back in the day that he's still proud of it 50, 60 years later? Oh, well, he was working with them, right? They were, oh, hey, you can go shut down this rivals organization or this organization we don't need anymore, and you'll get a bunch of press and we'll cut you in on something. Right. That would have been a nice reveal. It's to show the audience, but not tell his son before his son got murdered. So
right, again, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I don't know how it pays off or how it pays off later, because I read all these, but I haven't read all of them in approximately 8 years. So
the entire time of our friendship, you read it, you met me, and then that was that. We never read it.
I didn't think it could compare anymore because you're the only Protector I really respect now.
My heart.
So yeah, they're on their way to meet the Mafia guy, the biggest Don ever, who's apparently his wife is also friends with home. And they're like, oh, nobody knows where we are. He's like, there's a homing beacon if they need us. Bro, why didn't you give that homing beacon to Night Mask? Why didn't you give that homing beacon to all your guys? Why are they, this homing beacon, which you had absolute faith in, why would you not have, why do they have it? Why are they relying on these Fisher Price walkie-talkies with the orange tip that if you're 15 feet away, you can't hear anything? Yeah. What's going on here?
Right.
It's just such a fun book. It's just so solid. You just want to keep reading. I just want to keep staying immersed in this universe. Those are my 2 big complaints. And it's mostly poking fun in a good way. I'm laughing with them. I'm not laughing at them. And I think they know that. Some things just happen in comic books to happen. Night Mask was there to die. We needed a problem with communicators. It's how it all goes. I think from start to finish, you feel like more about most of these characters and you like or dislike them at the end of issue 6. And I think that it was very cool that this sold well enough to where it's gonna be an ongoing now. Way to go. I mean, it's obviously a success on some level, and Malibu does it again, right? There it is, right at the top. I can't speak highly enough about it. It was just a really, really exciting and fun read for me when I was a kid.
All right.
But I've got more to say about it.
Oh, he's just got to get a drink.
Because I decided that when I talked with y'all, what was going on in the press? What were the magazines saying about the things we're talking about at the time? And I was inspired by Jeremy Parrish, who does NES Works, a great YouTube video series where he just talked, when he's talking about NES and SNES games, now that there's Nintendo Power, at this point in his chronology, he's like, well, what did they say? I was like, I should do something like that. Comic Scene had the best coverage, probably bar none, for issues 1 through 6. There really wasn't much coverage outside of Comic Scene and Wizard. There were a lot of ads. There were a lot of ads in every magazine I could get my hands on, but the best article is a 4.5-page in-depth article in Comic Scene number 23, which Ray Jones is interviewed. He talks about all the characters, connection to the Centaur characters, the history, what he's going to do with each of these characters, and where he kind of sees us going. And it talks to Malibu in general about how they're trying to get their own superhero stuff going at the time. It's a very good article. Wizard did not dedicate an article in and of itself to the Protectors during this time, but in the Wizard News, it had a couple little headlines, little columns. Number 14, they covered the Arrow spinoff one-shot. Okay. Talked about how that would be coming out. Number 15 kind of covered the whole line in general. They got a bigger column, and, well, I keep saying column. It wasn't a column in and of itself. It's just divided up. It's newspaper articles within the column. So they got a bigger mention and a little more look at the characters. Number 19 had this, and they had a picture, and I posted this in the Malibu Sun group recently, of a pump gun, a Nerf gun that was licensed for the Protectors that would have shot these foam balls. It never came out, but I distinctly remember this article, and there's a picture of a kid with one of them. And number 25, they covered the jab controversy, where Shannon Wheeler had shot the book, shot his copy, his print run of a jab, and Protector said, we didn't know anything about it. Malibu, we didn't know anything about it. And Shannon Wheeler was like, I had to have known. And they doesn't come to any conclusions, but it was really cool to see it covered. And that's pretty much the extent of the coverage the press gave Protectors number 1 through 6.
Okay.
All right.
Wow.
All right.
Very cool. Well,
I don't know if that adds anything or not, but I thought it was pretty neat.
No,
and,
I think it does.
You can go and look at that stuff for yourself if you want to find it. But there was definitely a little buzz. I would say minor league buzz, not huge buzz. I don't think it was unfairly represented at the time in Wizard or Comic Scene. The Comic Scene article, I think it was a home run.
Yeah. I could see the coverage for this probably getting lost in that wash of Image press that Image was getting. So for a book like this to kind of go under the radar, it was still something that I was sort of aware of. I wasn't picking this up or anything, right, but I knew it was there. All right, guys, we did it. We made it through. That was 6 issues. I mean, I learned a lot. I think our listeners learned a lot. This was a good episode. So let's go.
Had a lot of fun. You can't. They're going to be in dollar bids, so they're not collected. But until you get to issue 15, you can usually find them. 15 to 20. That's where it starts to get kind of hard.
The other thing, we mentioned this before, but it's, I just want to go back to this. They beat the villain by holding a funeral for a member of the team that the villain has murdered, because they know the villain's not going to be able to resist it. Like, it's so messed up. Again, it's almost building up a team called the Protectors in a way where you think you're going to be the bigger threat. You have the president on your side. He was the first mystery man in this continuity. He loves you guys. He's pulling out all the stops. You got your communications fixed. You have people on your team who are immortal, with godlike abilities, who are very, very strong. You're the terrifying ones. And I love that scene because they do bury the kid afterwards. But someone in that room was like, well, what if we just hope the bad guy attacks the very crowded funeral, and then it works, and then they beat him because we need to do this. We need to beat him. He's attacking public places. He's killing civilians. He's doing all the stuff you're not supposed to do that no one's trained to do.
Sadly, it's the best thing that could have happened.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. It really makes this nuanced story where the Protectors are the superheroes and they're the protagonists, but every time I would go back to this, I'm, oh yeah, there's that fine line between pragmatism and heroism, and that's what separates this from everything else. And I thought it was a really nuanced take, and it surprised me because I think if you think of books from this era, you don't necessarily think of that level of storytelling, and this thing knocks it out of the park. The other thing I want to bring up, and I know we always do this, I always feel bad. The art on this book is amazing. And I don't mean just for the time. I mean, it's very good. It holds up today. I don't know.
I want to talk about Diodato on inks here.
Yeah.
We just talked, as a matter of fact, I'm in the process of editing our Wonder Woman Artemis saga. We're doing this Diodato comic again. But yeah, R.A. Jones, we talked about him quite a bit. Thomas Darnick on pencils.
Yeah, Thomas Darnick does a great job here. And he designed most of these character updates from what I understand as well. So great job. I don't know who did all the covers, but the covers are killer. They really, these are covers that grab you. They may not quite be as flashy as some of the image or foil covers you might have been seeing at the time, but there's something that's very layered. But like the cover where the arrows on it, and it's got all that stuff going on. I just love that one. I think it's number 3.
Yeah. I mean, the interior art, it's this great, like, evolution, because the artist is clearly capable of doing the type of art you would see in the 80s and everything else. But it also has this very modern feel to it where all the small moments are allowed to breathe. But then when you have to have the splash page, when you really have to have the action, he doesn't bury the lead, but he also doesn't throw in the unnecessary splash pages and stuff that I love. I'm not bad-mouthing that stuff. I'm just saying this isn't that type of book. And I really appreciate that about it, because as I was reading it, I really felt myself not just saying, oh, okay, I want to know what happens at the end. It's no, I'm comfortable in these moments, in these panels. And his design work was great. Again, I said this before, but this book came out in 1992, but everyone looks kind of normal. Not if Dave Gibbons, you'd pass them in the street type normal, but definitely realistic proportions and things like that. And it was nice to read, because you go through and you're, okay, this book, it's not super flashy. It's not about a bunch of gods walking among men. It's about real people, but they are trying to do the right thing. And again, I found the entire thing to be incredibly engaging. And I don't know, I flew through it. I had to read it twice just to make sure I didn't miss anything.
I think you do wind up engaged with these characters a lot more than you'd think. And I meant to ask you all this question. And I don't want to sound disparaging either here, but some of these names, they're not going to stand up in 92 in a way, like Airman. Do you think the Protectors would have been more of a success if some of these other names had been updated? Phantom of the Fair became Gravestone? Or do you think it would have lost some of the charm that it did have? We'll start with you, Jesse, because you're the charming one.
I am a fan of really cool superhero names. And it was funny because as I was reading this, it did take me out a little bit. Okay, Amazing Man, and then Airman, and then Immortal Man, and then it was just on and on and on. I didn't know of the lineage. I didn't know of the Centaur comics. Okay. I didn't know this is Golden Age. So clearly the creators here, the ones that are doing this comic, want to pay some respect to what has come before. Changing the name of a character, that's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, they did change Gravestone's name, right? Mostly, I think, to differentiate it from the Phantom. But still, I mean, the Eternal Man could have just gone by Zardy.
Yeah, one of two things would have happened. Now, granted, this is the early 90s, but if you go and change these characters' names, what are you going to be accused of by your peers? That you're jumping onto whatever trend is going on at that point in time.
Fair. And you're not basing on anything at all. We can just make up new characters.
And you've got what your friends in the industry would probably rather see you do is absolutely pay respect to what came before by not changing at least that much. Now, as to whether that's going through their head or not, but for me personally, the question I've avoided the question you asked. Hell yeah, I wanted fucking new names for these people.
It would have been more successful if it had had updated names.
Now, as for successful,
they might have named it anything, and it wouldn't have mattered because of the way the market was going one way or another.
It all depends on how at the time it probably would have been beneficial, I think, because of the time period that this thing was released in. By 95 or 96 or something like that, you got a wary reader out there who's been reading comics kind of like I was for 5 or 6 years, and I would look at the Protectors being released in 96 with a bunch of cool names. Okay, here we got another Image ripoff. But as far as seeing it here in 92, I think it probably would have benefited him. That's my opinion.
What about you, Darry?
Yeah, I'm of two minds of this. One, I don't know that you get a lot with the Centaur comics, right? I don't think you do. And you could have turned Airman into another character and given him a completely different origin like he did with a lot of these other ones. I mentioned before, Manowar's origin is updated to deal with the Iranian Revolution. That sounded really interesting. That sounded like a story.
Arrow's involved with the Latin American Death Squad.
Yeah, they're not afraid to change things and add things. So a lot of this, I kind of was...
Sponsored by the U.S., by the way, Edward. Go on.
Yeah, but you don't get a lot by using the Centaur characters. Again, you're not pulling from ones people might know. You're not saying, oh, what if Sherlock Holmes and Dracula and Black Terror and Steamboat Willie all teamed up and formed the Justice League? It's like, you're not necessarily going to know who these are. But considering he named one of the characters Mr. Monday, I don't know how much gas was left in the tank here. So maybe leaving some of the names as they were okay. I do like the name Gravestone. I thought that was
great. But that's the name that was changed. He was the Phantom of the Bears. I think it would lose some charm if you changed it, but it's something that people have asked me before. I don't think it would have mattered in the long run. Like, it would have sold more copies. I mean, I don't think everything was about to die and it didn't matter. If you weren't in the upper third, you're about to face a lot of problems in the Protectors. Despite selling robust numbers, 90,000 copies, nothing to sneeze at, especially now. That wasn't the upper third at the time.
Yeah. And again, I think they were willing to change things when need be. And they renamed the characters Night Mask, and they made a couple other small alterations. If you read the handbook, it kind of walks you through a lot of that. So I think they were very practical in what they wanted to do.
All right, let's get into plugs here. Dean Compton, Unspoken Decade. Tell them all about it.
The Unspoken Decade's on Facebook. 20,000 follows, 12,000 likes. So we do things. I'm posting a lot of reels now. I hope people are enjoying them. I did one yesterday with the New Warriors Volume 2, The Boys Are Back in Town by Thin Lizzy. So watch, I'm very creative, very, very good at matching a song with some comic books. Good. So keep an eye on there. Let us know what you're thinking. Oh, there's stuff going on at the page. Emily Scott's going to be writing something soon. I'm writing something soon. Evan Bevins says he's going to write something real soon. So, and of course, Simby Fan is constantly writing. So check us out there. I am doing something on Blue Sky once every 10 days now, so hopefully I'll get that going a little bit more. But look for us there as well. We're having a great time always, and we'd love to have you if you ain't already there. And if you're already there, thanks for being there. Let us know what we can do better.
We love to hear from you. Next on the agenda, we have Killer Instinct on the agenda. Cyberforce, Wildcats, Ripclaw, Warblade. Oh, I'm excited. I've already read the first two, I think, of this series that we're going to get into. Currently, got all sorts of fun shows on here. Number one, Unspoken Issues, 90s Comics. That's our jam. So check out anything that's in the archive where us three guys are getting together talking about stuff. We got some other guys, Chris Armstrong, Evan Bevins, Speeding Bullet Comics once again. Emily Scott's coming in, Matthew Price. We have talked 90s Comics, lots of stuff out there for you to check out.
It's our own Protectors lineup. Yeah.
And then,
Night Mask.
Damn it, I was going to try and call somebody. I better not do that. I'm going to start that shit.
Don't worry, I'll make the dark joke. And I'll be the butt of it.
Oh, shit. But yeah, check out the Source Material Comics podcast, where that's comics of any era. We're usually jumping into just about anything. Right now, me and Mark Radulich are going through the Mask series, and I think the Mask Strikes Back happened, and then Mask Returns and Mask Strikes Back is about to happen here pretty soon. So check that out. That's a bloody, violent comic until you get to the third iteration, and then all of a sudden it's, oh my goodness, that movie did really good. We better tone down the violence here. Stanley Ipkiss is dead in the first run of that book. So anyway, you can check that out. It's a lot of fun. And I think, I'll go ahead and plug Snap Material, where myself, Evan Bevins, get together and we talk Marvel Snap. We do that once a month. We lay out about 5 20-minute episodes across a week, talking about the previous season, the upcoming season. And man, we have a lot of fun on there. We do on-air battles, and it's a good time. So with that being said, we are getting out of here. That up there is Darry. There is Dean Compton. I'm Jesse Starcher. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. Unspoken Issues is part of the UnspokenDecade.com, the home for 90s comics, blogs, and podcasts. Unspoken Issues also has a Facebook group you can join if you are interested. Just search the Unspoken Issues podcast and request to join. All of this would not be possible without W2Mnet.com, so make sure to seek them out for more podcasts. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to share, and we look forward to entertaining you again soon.
what got cut.
To be fair, in 1936, Brian O'Brien was probably a wonderfully imaginative name. I don't
Probably.
know. But,
yeah, it's that tweet where it's comedy in the 1800s was easy. All you had to do was go out there and twitch your eyes and go, I'm well aware of Delaware, and everyone would laugh. That's probably what it was. Oh, my God, his name's the same twice. Jesus Christ. I've never set foot off of my property.
I mean, it's so funny with all the Golden Age stuff. I think about this a lot. And now you can pull from 85 plus years of stuff.
Right.
But if you wandered in off the street like Jack Kirby did, and you could draw or you could write, and you found one of these fly-by-night publishers, and they were like, hey, you got a Superman in you? And you're like, what is that? And someone hands you 3 issues of Action Comics, and you go home, you take the subway home, and then you got to come back in on Monday with a script for issue 1. It's like, where do you pull this from? There's only a handful of books out there. You're worried you're going to get drafted. Some of these characters, they really just looked outside and they were, what do I got? Well, this guy's bulletproof. Fine. This one's bulletproof, but he swims. I mean, it's just, it's so funny.
Like I said with my protectors earlier, oh, the Avengers have one god? Well, my team has 2, you know?
Yep.
It does seem though. I mean, obviously there were sci-fi magazines and pulps and some movies to draw some inspiration from, but it definitely seems that some Golden Age guys are just sitting down and they look outside and a bird lands on a light pole. Oh, it's Lightbird! My God, he's a bird who can see in the dark. And they just go because hey, they got 10 pages due the next day. What the fuck ever?
Exactly, they got 10 pages due the next day.
You're making $8 a week, which is like a fortune. 3 weeks ago, your family was starving. Now you have a fortune. You're gonna shit these 10 pages no matter what you got to do, and nobody has anything to really compare it to. So is Lightbird good or bad? I don't know. There's only 10 comic books.
There's no comic books. There's no fans. There's no feedback. You have no idea if it's going to sell 1 million copies, which was a possibility. Shazam was selling over 1 million copies.
Absolutely.
Or if it's going to sell 3 copies. You have no idea because you've been paid and put it out of your mind. Airman. And then also, it's disposable. The kids who would hold on to it, they would do that to share to get other ones. Comic book collecting back then really wasn't a thing. That's why Action Comics was worth so much money.
Well, you've been holding these comics for 3 years. Let's get the fuck rid of them, buddy.
Yeah.
Or do you want the Japanese to win?
Exactly.
You know, I guess it's up to you.
Yeah. You got to sell those and get a war bond.
Right.
The other thing too is
because they were expected to be passed around, even in the nascent days of Golden Age comics. And I haven't seen a Centaur comic, but I bet it would be this. There's a lot of ads.
Oh,
we don't have any ads in comic books anymore, and they sort of get phased out, I guess, in the early mid-2000s, 2005, 2006. But when I started getting into it, there were still a lot of ads. But if you go back to the Golden Age, there's even more ads because I think they were, well, we're going to sell 1 million copies, 1 million kids, but 5 million kids are going to read it. So we can sell that audience that you can't sell now.
I always tell people superheroes are great, but before the Silver Age, they were only one genre. You go back to the 40s, you go back to the 50s, there were hundreds of comics that came out every week because you weren't yet competing with radio and television. And once that stuff ramped up, fine, everything else slowed down. But your westerns, your crime, your romance, all of this nonsense would come out. And to your point, they've already made their money because it's publishing. It's newspapers and magazines. They already made their money on the advertising. The advertisers paid them up front. They're going to run it 5 times. It's, oh, they're kids' ads. Fine. No one's paying attention. Run even crappier ads. Run even more garbage ads. And in The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, the Pulitzer-winning book about the Golden Age of comics, Michael Chabon's entire first act is built around the fact that the guy only agrees to publish comics because he got a warehouse full of surplus crap that he wants to unload to children. And the guy's like, well, I'll come up with a superhero so that you can sell that garbage. And of course, the superhero becomes much more popular. But I always remember that. No one thought this idea was going to work until Superman started selling breakfast cereal and toys and everything else. And here we sit with Avengers 4 being the highest grossing film of all time.
Before we get back to Protectors 2, another thing about the massive genres of the Golden Age that's easy to forget is the built-in worldwide audience of GIs. A lot of these comic books were shipped to people who would read anything they get their fucking hands on from home because you're in a goddamn tank in Belgium for the last 3 weeks. So superheroes were some of it, but those people also wanted to read crime stuff. They wanted to read more adventure-y things. They wanted to read more sci-fi things. So you knew you had that audience too. And the government was just going to buy them. So you didn't have to, well, there's not a whole lot of risk to be taken either. You're right. That there were a lot more genres and that was another reason for it.
And then even you expand it past that, those GIs, they didn't take those things home with them. The very first manga artists were all like American GIs were hanging around. They had Disney comics. They had everything else. They gave them to us. And suddenly we're like, what the hell is this? This is awesome. I mean, you look at very early manga in the middle of the 20th century, it's Disney comics with robots. And that's awesome because I love manga and I love anime and I love everything else. And the same thing in England. You talk to all the UK people and it's like, we got American comics because the GIs were here and they left them here. Or they got shipped as surplus or something else. It's we infected the rest of the world with this thing, and it really took hold in some places.
Good for us.
Yeah.
Hey, one of the,
USA. You're right. One of the few things to be proud of because comic books are great.
They are. They're great. They make you better. He's holding up a copy of Cyberforce, everyone at home. Cyberforce, our Bible over here, the Unspoken Decade, our Bible.
That's right, damn it. That is right.
And barely then Heatwave saith unto Ballistic, you sigh or to metal babe. I'm sure there was some charlatan, though, to make up for Bob Kane's lack of presence. I'm sure some rip-off artist was there. I don't know who. Victor Fox, probably. That guy's a fucking shady piece of trash.
You don't like... Oh, Victor Fox. Sorry, I thought you said Gardner.
Gardner Fox, cool guy, man.
Victor Fox.
Victor Fox was a shyster. Like,
Victor Fox was not... I mean, I don't know. His I think his heirs are pretty litigious. But no, the one good thing I always credit Victor Fox was he's the reason Kirby met Simon, right?
That is true.
That's, if nothing else, in the inevitable Jack Kirby biopic, he's the reason Kirby met Simon. That's
published Blue Beetle, so give him that.
Yeah, that's true. And the Blue Beetle's an interesting character in his own right, too, because technically he's in the public domain, but he's not really, right?
Well, same with these guys, with the Centaur Protector characters. If you want to do the Centaur characters, that's fine. You can't do Protector.
I could make an Airman comic.
You can make an Airman comic, and he can have the wings, and he can look like a combination of those guys from Silent Hill with the pyramid heads and Hawkman. He can look that because that's what he looks like, but you can't be like, oh, it's Airman and he was in the Protectors and he knows and the president was the clock and you could smell what he was ticking.
That's so funny because there's nothing stopping me, not that I'm going to do this, but there's nothing stopping me from doing a comic featuring the clock and Airman. But if I had the clock be president, could the Walt Disney Corporation send me a cease and desist letter?
Yes,
probably.
Yeah. It's like
you're definitely getting into weird territory there. Yeah. I mean, you had him, he was the president, but he was still also the superhero. And the story was they were still superhero buddies. You're probably just far enough away. I'm not a lawyer. This is pure guesswork. And it doesn't matter. Disney can crush you anyways. But I would say that was far enough away. But if you had him be the president and hire Airman to work for the government, that's probably out.
What motherfucker at Disney is sitting on that shit, watching for that?
He'd be shocked, bro. Surprised. He'd be surprised.
I just assume that Disney has a legal department.
They do.
And lawyers in every state, in every territory, and every country, because if you don't enforce your trademarks and your copyrights, then that's grounds for someone to come back to you and say, oh, listen, they almost saw Superman that way in the 40s. Well, they didn't properly enforce the trademark or the copyright. He's in public domain. It's no, he's not. Wow. Calm down.
Marvel lost Champions that way around like 2007 because they wanted to have a Champions book after Civil War, but there had been a Champions role-playing game, and they had been publishing Champions comic books since approximately 86 with Heroic, and they said, no, we kind of own that now, and Marvel was like, no, we do, and then the judge was like, bro, they do. Now, eventually they worked it out and Marvel could use Champions again. But if Marvel can lose that fight to someone like Heroic, anybody could lose it.
I am always hoping that someone at Marvel will screw up and forget to publish a Captain Marvel comic for a couple of years so DC can grab the name, because I hate calling him Shazam.
Captain now, right? The Mark Waid shit is lit, though.
If there weren't currently a Transformers comic that was the best comic coming out, the Shazam book would be my favorite book. But
Local Man's mine, but I get what you're saying.
Oh, Local Man, hard, easy number 3. Great. Sorry, Jesse, we have completely the train is off the tracks.
We need Gravestone to come and get us back going the right way.
We are so far gone. I'm sorry.
You are all right. I love listening to you guys hash it out over there.
Funny, you said before you've never seen a Centaur comic in the wild. I haven't either.
Why would you?
No, but it's so funny because they only made a couple of them, and then they didn't bother following up on this. So you go to a convention, you might see one, you might not even know what it is. I can't even picture the Centaur logo. It's just so funny to me.
There's a comic book store in Pittsburgh, and Jesse, you're not too far away, so if you ever find yourself up that way, called Leeds, and they have so much great shit. And you go to their basement, and I visited them several times. We're stopping in. Not as good as Feeding Bullet Comics in Norman, Oklahoma with Matthew Price, but if you're in Pittsburgh, go ahead and stop into Eads. They have an extensive Golden Age collection and Silver Age collection. You can see it. It's there. They have more books, too. And I remember being there, this guy was like, do you want to hold something? Do you want to see something? I was like, I can't afford to drop it, buddy. But they had shit like Captain Marvel Adventures, Fawcett Comics, Crime Does Not Pay, the Lev Gleason stuff, Fox stuff. There wasn't a Centaur comic. Yeah. They had some of those big boys from the 50s when they used to give them out in the restaurant. Wild shit. Not a Centaur comic. I don't remember seeing one.
Centaur is not the only one, right? I'm talking about Centaur. No. Because someone remembered them or thought a couple of these guys would be worth bringing back.
There are some we don't know about.
Exactly.
They published for 2 months and all their comics got destroyed somehow. And we might, because every now and then somebody will take a picture of something and they'll be, I'm sorry, what was Misery Loves Trouble? Or, be a picture of that comic, Misery Loves Trouble on the newsstand. And then all of a sudden, we got to hunt it down. And people, I've never seen one, or you don't see one.
I mean, the printing industry was this unregulated, other than mailing, this insane, all these bootleggers had nothing else to do. They were, let's start making this. Buy a paper mill, do the whole thing. We don't care. We just need content. Popped up. They published it. They changed their names. They moved on to something else. Yep. So
a lot of them were publishing pornos. Yeah, and this was a way to disguise that. This was a way to ship that stuff and everything. There's a lot of great places to read about it. Yeah. You say Cavalier and Clay is really good. I can't recommend the Gerard Jones book.
I was just going to say, the one I wish I could mention, and we can't mention it, no.
I mean, it's a good book, but I think I can't in good conscience.
It taught me, but no, I can't in good faith recommend it.
I mean, I guess if you want to read it, go get it from a super secondary store where we know he doesn't get any money.
Yeah, I guess. But Cavalier and Clay may be fictional, but I mean, if anyone's listening to this and you just want a good foothold into the golden age of comics, The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. And again, it's a mainstream, but it's not for nerds or something. It's Michael Chabon, for Christ's sake. Go cool. Read.
Okay, it's a cool person's book.
I remember it was a big deal at the time because back in the days before we were getting movies and stuff, someone recommended it to me and I was like, what are you talking about? They made a book about superheroes. I never heard of The Escapist. And it's like, no, they made him up for the book. And I was like, why are you telling me that? Do we think that Roy Thomas created the Ferret? Because it feels like a Roy Thomas character. Like if you told me he created the Ferret as a 3-year-old, I would absolutely believe that he.
I'm sure Roy Thomas photocopied some pictures of it and sent it to somebody and said he wrote it.
Jesse, do you know what we're talking about? Do you know what this is?
Oh, the whole Roy Thomas thing. Recently, he got credited for the creation.
He's going to be credited on Deadpool and Wolverine as one of the co-creators of the Wolverine for. I don't know what he's even claiming he did, but
he says that he told them, we should have a Canadian character. It should be called Wolverine. But
wasn't Len Wein Canadian?
What?
So
wasn't Len Wein Canadian? I don't
know. I can't say that. But I'm not sure. But even if he said that, he's the editor-in-chief. He has as an agent of the company at the time, he got benefits. He got all this stuff as an employee. You can't be an agent of the company and say the company deserves the ownership royalty from creating the character. It doesn't work that way, Roy. Also, there's all these interviews of him saying he didn't create Wolverine for all these years in the 90s and all this shit where he's like, you should ask Lynn about that. I didn't really have much to do with it. Also, Dave Cockrum says he showed him Wolverine before any of this happened. Also, a guy wrote into Food. Had the fucking drawing of a character named Wolverine who had the metal skeleton and shit. So listen, bro, you didn't do it. Just quit fucking around. Stop hanging out with this John Cimino guy. You're not as important as you think. Get over yourself. It's fine. Bro, you quote unquote wrote a million Conan stories. You photocopied the novel and sent it to your artist. Great. That's cool. Neat job. And you inarguably co-created the Vision, although it was just a Golden Age character.
But Kirby created the Vision. Come on. Really?
What are you talking about?
The Golden Age Vision was created because Kirby him and Simon would fill a room full of smoke, and they created the Golden Age Vision.
I'm saying. I was not finished.
Sorry.
Arguably co-created Vision, but then again, you just kind of took the Golden Age Vision. You say you co-created Morbius, but you say it was just a guy you saw in a movie named Morbius. I don't know. I've never hated Roy Thomas. I've always thought he was full of shit, not as good as people said. But now I'm just like, God, Roy, you suck. You suck. I guess he learned well from his mentor, though.
I was just going to say that.
Get as much credit as you can for things that you didn't really do and make as much money as you can. And you know what? I guess that's the name of comic books anyway.
But to tie it back to you specifically, I saw the best quote I saw about this entire thing this week was, even Stan Lee, even Roy Thomas's mentor, the man himself, did not take credit for creating the Punisher when he was the one who said use the name the Punisher and not, I think it was the Executioner or something else. And if Stan Lee had the opportunity to take credit for something, you know he was going to. And if even he passed on it, then Roy, come on, man, stop it.
Julie Schwartz suggested a trillion things. At no point was he like, oh, I co-created Animal Man. Yeah. All he said was maybe a guy could have some animal powers. Work with that. Here's here's a cover idea I've got. And that's it, because that's your job as the editor on behalf of the company. It's not, there are exceptions. Tom DeFalco is a co-creator of Darkhawk, even though he was the editor-in-chief, because apparently him and 4 people sat in a room and actually created it together. That's fine. I'm not saying under no circumstances can an editor do that, but you can't, but an editor of the book that they are editing, because when Roy did this Wolverine shit, he was the editor-in-chief, so he's the only editor at Marvel. So he edited every book, but when the editor of the book they're editing makes a suggestion and somebody and writers and artists elaborate on it and go further, no, the editors that's just their job within the realms. They're acting as the company. The company is doing that job, not Roy Thomas. Marvel did that job, and we can't blur those lines because in a business that is already dead set on making sure that creators get as little money and as little recognition as possible. We can't lose anymore. I say I've ever created anything other than the fucking drawing of a smiley face on a bologna sandwich with mustard.
He tried to create the Protectors.
Sure he did.
He stole it. Then once Protectors was taken, I changed it to Protection Agent, right? And then I was like, oh, I'm mad at him for stealing Protectors, right? There'll be a protection agency north of South America, Europe, Africa. Oh, well, that sounds familiar, Mr. Compton. Mr. Compton, you're mad at him for stealing your idea. Aren't you taking something here? No.
All right. I think we're more than halfway through these characters.
Good.
I will say that I was very excited before I actually read the comics and I saw Mighty Man was here and I was like, did Eric Larson use a Golden Age character I'm not? Was there another Shazam knockoff during the Golden Age that I wasn't aware of? And then I saw this Hank Pym knockoff and I was, oh, okay. All right. That's fine.
Speaking of Mighty Man, I just read the Megaton Archives trade paperback, and he's in that, and he dies. So,
oh really?
Spoiler.
The original.
Well, I mean,
right?
Before Ann Stevens becomes.
Yeah.
Vanguard kills him accidentally.
Oh, I love the Savage Dragon. Now that Invincible, everyone is obsessed with this. If someone picks up another Image property, I would love Mighty Man. I would love so that the end of the first episode, Shazam lands and turns back into this 22-year-old nurse who is a different gender and everything else. I would love it. I would love to watch people's reaction to that. I think it would
go nuts.
The internet would just crack in half and just burn down like the Titanic.
It would be me too. I was trying to explain to my son, we were watching Invincible, my 14-year-old son, he's a big fan of Invincible and the show. And I'm trying to explain to him, hey, dude, obviously this is based on a comic and there is an Image universe, man. There is an Image universe. At one point, we have Savage Dragon. We've got all these great heroes.
Stormwatch, Vanguard, Brigade.
The Ninja Turtles. Never forget that. Never forget Ninja Turtles Volume 3 was set in the Image Comics universe. Yeah,
it's non-canonical now.
We are actually,
of course.
But it's canonical for Savage Dragon, so
it's canonical for Savage Dragon, and somewhere in the Turtles Forever multiverse, I'm sure Cyborg. I forget which one was the Cyborg. I think
Donatello. We just read that. We did it because we're doing an episode on issue 4. It's me and Chris, and I think Evan's joining us with that one. Issue 4 is Cyborg Donatello who shows up, and good stuff, man.
Harry Carlson writes it too, so
we gushed about how excited we were seeing Image Comics and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the same fucking cover.
Right.
I mean, Oh, so good.
I mean, people don't understand.
You got more than when you saw TMNT Adventures Archie. Hey, don't sleep on those comics. They're actually not bad.
I've heard good things.
It's so funny because people don't get it. Now, 30 years later, it's easy to look back at Image and say, what are you guys getting excited about? I don't understand. But at the time, it's no, man, you are on the ground floor. And not only are you getting new characters from the creators you already, the Turtles are there. They had Power Ranger comics for a while. They were picking up all this indie stuff. They didn't have the same limitations as the big two. They weren't afraid to throw everything at you, and if you liked something, maybe it would continue, maybe it wouldn't. You don't know. You have no idea. I always go back to the fact that it was later on in Image's canon, but The Darkness very famously had a story where he teams up with Batman, and that is canon to The Darkness. For the rest of his series, he would reference the time he met this great superhero, and he'd be cool. And Batman and Spawn too. Spawn had his face sewn up with a shoelace for a bunch of issues because Batman hit him with a batarang in a Frank Miller comic. Stuff like that was really cool because Image was we won't draw Batman into the comics we don't own. Fine, we don't have to cut a check to these companies, but they weren't afraid of everything else. And it was so cool to see as a moody teenager.
Yeah, Devil's Reign, the Top Cow Marvel crossover, it's one of the only crossovers in history that remains canonical to both universes, which is really a big testament. Wow. You got to work hard for that. So I think the thing about Image, and obviously off track, but Malibu did publish Image. If you don't remember the world before it, you don't really understand. I can remember a time when there were no chicken nuggets, because Chicken McNuggets were the first to really pop up and make this a thing. The idea that now there's all kinds of boneless wings and chicken bites and strips and blah, blah, blah. But before Chicken McNuggets, there wasn't any of this. And Image, it's not like there was no fast food or no way to eat chicken or anything like that, or no chicken sandwiches or whatever. But it changed it changed a lot of things about it to where it's splintered off into all sorts of things that you can do now that before that no one would have just thought of because there was nothing to springboard from. And that's kind of how I feel about Image, if that makes any sense. There were comic books before Image, but it's not like Image like, oh, now people be creative. It was more just like, look how exciting this is, and we can own this, and we can make the money that comes from it. Yeah. And it grew into be even more than that, to where you can have books, everything from The Walking Dead and Invincible to stuff like, The Me You Love in the Dark, which is completely different than that stuff. So it's very interesting to see. Yeah.
If we ever adopt a slogan, I want it to be Image Comics, the chicken nuggets of the comic book industry, because that's so accurate. It's a little scary, and I love it. Because you're 100% right. It's not what was published at the time that's important. It's the fact that they published on their own and did very well and continue to this. I mean, they're the number 3 publisher in America, which might not be a big deal to some people, but they stuck around. Dozens, if not hundreds of companies started in that period of time and just before then and didn't work. They're here today, and they've got Kirkman. They've got all these other things that are true, no questions asked success stories. And that happened right when we started reading. It's very, very important, regardless of how much I want to make fun of Rob Liefeld or how much I want to point at that early stuff. It's still worse than any of the early Marvel or DC stuff. I mean, we just remember it more because it was everywhere. So,
all right.
And guys, Malibu published them to bring it all back home.
Bring it all back around.
Malibu was their first publisher, and Malibu's doing this Protectors here, which also I think for Malibu as a company was kind of a game changer in that same on a smaller level. Malibu prior to this, I mean, I'm going off memory here, but they were made up of a lot of different imprints. They had published X Mutants and Dinosaur for Hire as black and whites. They'd done some licensed comics. They were primarily a black and white company that did a lot of creator-owned stuff. And here was the thing they were going to own, that they were going to push. And that's a big change for Malibu. And you can kind of see how their thoughts were going, because later they'll do the Ultraverse, but you can kind of see where their mindset as a company was changing fairly big at this time, where we're going to phase out some of this stuff we had been doing, and we're going to go more and try and get an identity as a company.
Yeah, well said. They definitely were curious about what separates us from the other companies, and having an identity was so difficult because it was why you? Why buy a Malibu? Maybe I'll buy 3 more Spider-Man comics. It's why you? And it's you're going to get something from us you're not going to get from them. And I think Protectors is an excellent example of that, because on the surface it does look what you'd expect, but it's not, and it's willing to take a lot more risks. And I think that defines Malibu. Malibu isn't one of those stories about a company that closed. They got bought. They got bought for a lot of money. I'm I'm sure Dean knows all these guys on a first name basis, but I've heard them talk about it. We had a success story. We created a company. We worked with some of our heroes. We paid them a good wage. We put out a lot of books. We did a lot of good stuff. Freaking Exiles. I mean, they did stuff no one else was doing. The Ultraverse was very successful. And then someone showed up.
Has a very strong cult following to this day.
Oh,
They were losing a lot of money toward the end, certainly. But Marvel stepped in, overbid DC, and got them again. I think to a lot of fans, it's seen as not a success story because they ceased publication and their identity was eventually submerged within Marvel. But for all intents and purposes, if you were an owner of Malibu on some level, yeah, it was probably the best you could. Certainly the best. I think the ultimate success story is Malibu Comics is still publishing today and is top 5 publisher. But if that doesn't happen, there are worse things than Marvel buying you and attempting to use a lot of your properties for the next few years.
Yeah, I will say, and I mentioned this earlier, one thing that DC does very well is integrating the properties that it purchases, right? It buys Quality, it buys Fawcett, it buys Wildstorm, and it integrates them. Right now, there's a book coming out called The Outsiders, which stars a bunch of Wildstorm characters. I think if they had bought Malibu, I think those characters would be part of the DC universe. I think Hardcase would be a Teen Titan or whatever.
Yeah, I do think
would be. Yeah, exactly. That Prime would be a Teen Titan. And
Hardcase would be a guy who, you'd see him in maybe that secondary Justice. You have the Justice League book. He's on that next book for sure. Yeah,
exactly.
He'd have freaks hanging out with the Teen Titans and Young Justice and stuff. Why wouldn't you?
Prototype Booster Gold ongoing. Manthra's going into the Amazon island until people find out she's a dude. Yeah, you could see the stories that they would tell with those characters. But unfortunately, for the one time in history that Marvel got there first for some arbitrary financial reason, Marvel got them, was like, we don't want them. We don't want anything to do with them. We don't want to compete with them. Spider-Man, and put them in a drawer. And now, because of other things that have happened that I don't really want to go into here, I doubt you'll ever see most of those characters. So it's just, it's
weird though. You did see they brought the Ego Gym back recently, which was an thing from the Ultraverse. Rue got a HeroClix recently. Yeah. So it's who knows what we'll see or what we won't see. Maybe we'll see the Protectors again. Who knows?
I love seeing that hope in the Ultraverse Facebook group. Somebody was talking about recently, there's some kind of a big something or other behind in an X-Men comic that they don't know who it's going to be. Like somebody's in prison and they're like, watch it be. They mentioned somebody from the Ultraverse comic, and I'm like, oh boy, wouldn't that be something?
It would be. It probably isn't. But if it is, great. If it isn't, fine. The thing about these comics, though, is they still exist. There's a lot of people. I wish they could bring back the Ultraverse. I wish they'd bring back Protectors. I wish they would do this. All this stuff is there. It's like John Lennon said about the Beatles records. It's all there if you want to reminisce. Everything's not going to be X-Men 97. Okay, some of this stuff will get brought back, and you won't like it. You won't think it's as good. So be careful what you wish for. But as it is, you can get all the Protectors back issues now. You can get almost every meaningful Ultraverse comic book you can get now. So go get them if you're interested. Your headcanon's the most important thing anyway.
That's right.
Yeah, hyper time, baby. The way you understand the story is the most important thing you take from it.
Hyper time.
Right.
In Washington's heart, the Bastille army did attack. 15 lives were lost, the skies were turning black. Mr. Monday's message, a war was to begin. The city lay in ruins, darkness creeping in. Oh, protectors rise in freedom's name, to guard our land, to shield our flame, from sea to shining sea, with courage true. United we'll prevail, red, white, and blue. Robert O'Brien, with a heavy heart, called upon the heroes, each to play their part.